Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Shall we begin, sir?
Yeah, I'm quite fine. Am I coming through clearly in terms of my voice?
Sir, we are able to hear you, but
Yeah,
not able to
okay.
see you.
I'm unmuting the.
Ah, yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
I'm not able
All
to see
right.
myself, though. Okay, fine.
Right.
Thank
We
you.
will start with a prayer and then a
Okay.
quick introduction, and then we will hand it over to you, sir.
So the total thing is 90 minutes. I should
That's
plan the
right.
present for about 60 minutes and leave time for discussion, right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you. I look
Okay.
forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Namaste, everyone. Namaste. Welcome back. Hope we all had a good off yesterday and we were able to refresh and rejuvenate. Now we have another week ahead of a lot of learning and insightful and deep content ahead of us in IKS. Today's Vishaya is going to be on India's knowledge systems, health and life sciences. In the times we are in, I think this is very, very important, and how we can go back to our roots, our Indian knowledge systems in this field. And today we have Dr. A.V. Balasubramanian ji from the Center for Indian Knowledge Systems. We will begin with a short prayer. I request my friend Namrata ji to go ahead and render the prayer for today.
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनामधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरि ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम।
Thank you so much, Namrata ji. Once again, namaste to all of you. Today, the first session is going to be on Vriksha Ayurveda, and the Vishaya for the day is health and life sciences. We have Dr. A.V. Balasubramanian ji. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today, spending time with us and sharing your wisdom with us. I take this opportunity, and I should say this is a great privilege for me to be introducing you to all of the viewers and the participants here today. Dr. A.V. Balasubramanian ji is a biologist by training, having studied biochemistry, molecular biophysics, and physiology at Bangalore University, Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, and the State University of New York at Stony Brook in USA. Since 1982, he has been involved in work relating to various aspects of traditional Indian sciences and technologies and trying to explore their current relevance and potential. In 1995, he founded the Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, CIKS, an institution devoted to exploring the contemporary relevance and applications of Indian knowledge systems, particularly in the area of sustainable agriculture. He is currently the director of Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, CIKS. Thank you so much, sir, once again for joining us. I hand over the session to you.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be part of this meeting and have an opportunity to share with you. Am I coming across clearly? I just want to ask the participant and the host.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely
Okay, fine. Yeah. So the topic for the day is Vriksha Ayurveda, which is traditional Indian plant science, and I pose the question of it's also the agriculture in the future. May I just request you to enable me to share screen so that I can make the presentation myself?
Yes, sir. We have enabled the option. Yeah.
Thank you. Is the first slide clearly visible to all of you?
Yes, it is
Okay,
visible.
good. I have windows popping up every now and then saying there are people waiting to be admitted. I am not acting on that. I presume that the hosts are acting on it. Okay?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the topic of today's meeting is Vriksha Ayurveda, traditional Indian plant science, and the agriculture of the future. I'm just trying to move on to the next slide. Yeah. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. I start with introduction to the topic and tell you something about the source material. Then I go on to addressing issues relating to testing, validation, and utilization of practices. Talk to you about some unique Vriksha approaches, and then talk to you about the current relevance and potential. I just have a small question to the organizers. My colleague is telling me that the slide is not visible full screen. Is everybody able to see my PowerPoint presentation clearly?
Sir, we are able to view it, but it's not on slideshow. Do you want to share it on slideshow?
I'm just trying to see how it can. Let me see if I can take the help of my colleague. Just 1 minute.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you help me, Nancy? Hi, please confirm, is this a better view?
Sir, it is not yet in slideshow. We are still, but we are able to view it though. It's in the bottom right. The option is in the bottom right hand side. Huh. It's in the bottom right hand side of the screen. There will be an option.
Yes.
Yeah, this is much better, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
My apologies. I must have taken the trouble to take this out earlier, but I'll continue.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So I first get on to the introductory section saying what is Vriksha Ayurveda, what are the sources regarding Vriksha Ayurveda, that is classical knowledge and folk knowledge, the scope of Vriksha Ayurveda, and then how it talks about plants and health and disease, contents of a typical Vriksha Ayurveda text, and then go on to folk traditions. Ayurveda, as we all know, is broadly thought of or defined as the science of life. It's not just about medicine or treating people who are sick, but how to live wisely in the world, how to balance your various purusharthas, and how to maintain good health. In this, there is a subsection that is Mriga Ayurveda, which is Ayurveda for animals, and Vriksha Ayurveda is not so widely known, which is Ayurveda for plants and trees. If you ask yourself what are the source material related to Ayurveda, there are two broad kinds of sources. I'd say there is classical literature, which is Shastri Parampara, and there is folk literature, which you can broadly call as Lok Parampara. So classical literature consists of texts as manuscripts or published books. They have a clearly spelled out theoretical framework, and the fundamental principles are drawn from Ayurveda. Namely, what they have common in Ayurveda is Panchamahabhut Siddhanta and Tridosh Vichar. So what are these classical texts? There are three broad categories, I'd say. There are Puranas and Samhitas. There are general texts in which Vriksha forms a part or a chapter. And then there are texts that are specific to Vriksha as a whole. When I say Puranas and Samhitas, these are encyclopedic compilations of knowledge. They synthesize varied disciplines. For example, Agni Purana contains a chapter on Vriksha. Brihat Samhita really, the word literally means the huge compilation or the mastery compilation, Brihat. Brihat Samhita attributed to Varanmila has sections dealing with Vriksha. Then there are texts of a general nature, which are not dealing with agriculture or medicine per se as a main subject. For example, you look at Arthashastra of Kaugilya. It has extensive sections on crop management, crop diseases, care of animals, and even agroforestry. For example, it has interesting insights and even prescriptions as to how seeds should be dried and preserved. Now, there are texts specific and devoted to Vriksha. For example, there are a large number of manuscripts, both in India and abroad. There is a vast spread and variety of manuscripts in Sanskrit. There are also texts in various other Indian languages, including Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, and also texts in languages such as Persian. I'll just let you know the names of a few of the popular and well-known Vriksha texts. There is Sulapala Krita Vriksha, which is Vriksha of Sulapala. Then there is Kashyapiya Krishi Sukti, which is attributed to sage Kashyapa. There is Krishi Parasara, authored by sage Parasara, and Upavana Vinoda, that forms part of Sharangadana. There are also texts in various Indian languages, like Lokopakara and Kannada. What you see on the screen is the cover page of this text called Krishi Gita, that was composed in Malayalam. What is the scope of the subject? What does Vriksha talk about? It talks about various things, and a few illustrative examples are talks about collection, selection, and storage of seeds, germination and sowing, various techniques of plant propagation and grafting, nursing and irrigation, testing and classification of soil, selection of soil suitable for various plants or types of plants, manuring, pest and disease management, nomenclature and taxonomy, description and classification of plants to suit varied purposes, favorable and unfavorable meteorological conditions for various agricultural operations like planting, sowing, harvesting, and so on. Use of plants as indicators of weather, water, and minerals. And then it talks about certain what we call as botanical marvels. Now, the scope of this presentation is limited, and I'll only be able to, give you an indication of some of these aspects. But I thought you should know that the scope is quite vast. So the broad Vriksha approach is, it talks about plants and health, how to promote good health and growth, treatment of pests, diseases, and injuries. In plants and health have prakriti, just as in the case of human beings. Treatment of pests, diseases, and injuries is very similar to Ayurvedic approach to the treatment of human beings. Now, nature of constitution of plants, prakriti. There are plants that may have vata, pitta, or kapha type prakriti, and you will see a lot of parallels to the prakriti in the case of human beings. A vata type plant is likely to be slender, tall, light in weight, and rough on the surface. And at the other end of the spectrum, the kapha type plant is likely to have stout and thick stems, plenty of leaves and branches, abundant fruits and flowers. So here are a few illustrations that give you some idea of what vata type plants look like, pitta type plant looks like, and kapha type plant looks like. In terms of treatment of diseases and pests, there are two broad categories. There may be diseases that are endogenous, like diseases arising due to imbalance of vata, pitta, or kapha. Exogenous, like which are the text talk about diseases, problems being caused due to fire, injuries, physical injuries like breaking away of branches, as well as by lightning. And similarly, there are lines of treatment for vata disorders, pitta disorders, and kapha disorders. Characteristics of plant affected by vata. Here is the photograph in which I shared a very old plant, which is in the premises of Ramanashramam and Tiruvannamalai. It's deformed. There are nodes and globules in the leaves, scanty water content and sap, and it tends to be rough and dry. Similarly, there are indications for pitta affected plants, yellow or discolored leaves. Oozing occurs in the fruits, languor of leaves and flowers, and premature aging. In fact, all of you from folk knowledge, or even those who have some background of Ayurveda, can easily recognize the parallel between this and what Ayurveda talks about human disorders. For example, typically a pitta constitution person or a pitta affected person tends to have some of these characteristics, like showing premature aging in terms of graying of hair, or in the case of Kamala, it is a yellow coloring or a pallor of various body fluids. Similar thing we have about kapha affected plants. Now there are general methods of treatment of plants that are afflicted by the three doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha. For example, typically, treatment of a vata affected plant means irrigation of the soil with solutions or decoctions, prepared with substances that are madura and sweeter, sweet substances, unctuous substances, replacing the dry soil with moist soil, and so on. There are similar lines of treatment for pitta and kapha affected plants, but I won't go into in detail. One of the questions that we ask or ask ourselves or get asked is that are these costs of these treatments very high? We often find the mention of substances such as ghee, honey, and milk. We'll review this point a bit later in the presentation. I want to give you an idea of what does a typical Vriksha text contain, how are the chapters organized, what are the topics covered, and a few illustrations. Take, for example, this text, Sarangara Samhita Padhati or Upurana Vinita, Vriksha Ayurveda of Sarangara. The original author is said to be Sarangara, who was a courtier of King Hamira and is said to belong to about 13th century. This book is available in English translation. One of the English translations was made by Professor S.K. Ramchandra Rao from Bangalore and published in 1993. How is the text organized? It starts with an initial chapter of 3 shlokas, which talks about the importance of gardening. Then there is a general chapter with 20 shlokas, talks about the importance of trees, the punya that is associated with planting, with trees in general, and with each type of tree. Good or bad signs related to residence near trees. There are clear indications as to some of the trees that are suitable and indicated for planting in a residence compound or close to a residence, and certain other things that are not suitable, which may be suited only for planting in public places. Selection of soil. Types of soils, their indications, which plants suit which soil. Classification and propagation of plants. Types of plants and propagation methods. Rules for seed sowing, seed treatment and types of sowing. The process of planting, method of planting, auspicious and inauspicious plants, the spacing, watering of plants, explaining watering, that is irrigation in various parts of the day, year, etc. Then they talk about protection of trees, Raksha Mantra, how a garden should be constructed, examination of soil for well, explain various signs and symptoms for where we can strike and find water. Then we talk about how to nourish plants, various recipes that are given which may be considered as fertilizers of growth enhancement. Kunapa Jala, which is a repeated reference found in many Ayurveda texts of what can be called in today's context as a liquid manure or biofertilizer. Recipes for treatment of plants, botanical marvels, that is, various methods for doing certain what we call as wonders, signs of good growth, various signs for good cultivation, where what can be cultivated. This is to give an idea of how a typical Ayurveda text will be organized. Okay, these, for example, are specific illustrations from some Ayurveda text. I'm going to skip. Now, then I get to folk literature or Lok Parampara. Till now, I talked about the Shastric literature or the classical literature. I'm also saying that there is a folk parampara or a Lok Parampara. Just as you have a folk tradition or a Lok Parampara when it comes to medicine or Ayurveda, or various other branches of knowledge like music, grammar, language, etc. There is also Lok Parampara Vriksha. Where can you find information? In a sense, everybody in India who is a farmer, everybody in India who is a gardener, many housewives, anybody who tends the garden is really a carrier of folk parampara. In today's context, if you say where are you going to look for it, you can say there are popular magazines and newsletters. There are publications in technical peer-reviewed journals and PhD theses. Then there are special compilations, such as the one made interestingly by ICR, Indian Council for Agricultural Research. Honey Bee is a magazine that has been produced for over 30 years by Professor Anil Gupta and his colleagues from the Center for Management of Agriculture in Ahmedabad that contains a whole lot of prescriptions, recipes on various aspects of agriculture, including care of plants, care of cattle, care of animals. Asian Agri-History Foundation publishes this interesting bulletin called Asian Agri-History. They not only edited, compiled, and produced a whole lot of material relating to Ayurveda, but they also publish a journal which contains a lot of articles relating to Ayurveda. Okay. Then there is the Indian Journal of Traditional Knowledge that's published by Neskar of Sayasera that also contains a whole lot of articles on various aspects of traditional practices and knowledge relating to cultivation of plants and care of plants. So a question often arises, we all have a doubt. Variety of things are said in texts and manuscripts, varieties of things that texts and folk knowledge. Are they tested, validated? Are they being utilized? Who has tested it and who has validated it? This is quite a challenge because quite often modern scientific community or modern scientific institutions do not have this on their agenda, at least not as a priority, that they want to do any testing or validation looking at traditional knowledge. But here we have some interesting examples I'd like to cite. There is a major effort for testing and validation that was carried out by ICR, Indian Council of Agricultural Research. There have been efforts by organizations like my current organization, CIKS, Center for Indian Knowledge System. There are also efforts by various other organizations. To begin with, let me share with you details about this effort by ICR. Between the years 2002 and 2004, ICR carried out a detailed survey and documentation regarding traditional practices relating to agriculture. They produced a total of 7 volumes, including 1 volume on documentation and validation, 1 volume on cross-validation. As part of these 7 volumes, they documented nearly 5,000 practices, 4,879 to be precise. They brought out a series of technical volumes of this kind. I'm just sharing with you the cover pages of a couple of these documents. What do the contents of a document look like? For example, if you look at a typical document, it classifies the practices into various thematic categories, like there is chapters on rainwater management, crops and cropping system, pest and disease management, post-harvest technology, fisheries, ethnobotany and agrobiodiversity, and so on. Now, after documenting these nearly 5,000 practices, ICR went on to do a very interesting thing. They picked out about 111 of these practices, and then they distributed these practices, which were considered promising and interesting, to a variety of modern science institutions. These included Krishi Vigyan Kendras, State Agricultural University, ICR Research Institute. Said, can you please look at it and see if you can subject to test it, validate it, if it is correct from the point of view of modern scientific methodology. This, for example, is from one of the chapters in the validation volume. The title of the ITK is the use of Kokila, Strychnus naxomica. We call it as Ekti in Tamil, mixed cow dung compost in brinjal. There is a farmer, name of the address is this farmer from Ganjam district of Odisha, who says he has a traditional practice. There is a particular way of composting cow dung along with this particular herb. And he says this compost is used as a nutrient for brinjal can be used to control fruit and shoot borer. So what do they do? The experimenters are A.K. Das and his colleagues. They are from Department of Agriculture, Odisha University, then Krishi Vigyan Kendra and another part of Odisha and so on. This chapter describes the detailed methodology that is used for testing. If you look at the concluding paragraph, it says, the use of Kokila mixed cow dung compost reduces the incidence of fruit and shoot borer in brinjal considerably. It also matches with the claim of the disclosure. For each one of these 111 practices, they have described in a chapter what came out of this practice. Now, we did a meta-analysis of these practices that have been subject to testing and validation. Broadly, what we found was, of the 111 practices tested, 95 were proved valid as per the ICAR records. 3 were said to be partly valid. About 2, they said it has to be repeated. And they said 10 is not valid. Now, if you look at this table, these figures are quite remarkable. Basically, what it tells you is that of the 5,000 practices, when they picked up a representative sample, nearly 90% of these practices are proved either completely valid or partly valid from the modern scientific perspective. More interestingly, when we looked at practices that were described as not valid, we found that there is an interesting factor. Quite often, traditional knowledge is very context specific. If you have a piece of knowledge relating to agriculture that I pick up from, let us say, Nagapattinam, which is a delta region in Tamil Nadu in a particular ecosystem, if I take it out of the context and take it to the laboratory, I'll have to look closely to see if that context is reproduced, those particular conditions are reproduced. Quite often, if you pick it out of the context, it doesn't mean the same thing, it means something different. In other words, we are looking at a huge treasure trove of knowledge which is tested and validated. It's very remarkable and very significant. The only sad thing is we are not gone on to do anything big with it or build with it. You would think that if you have such a treasure trove of tested, validated practices, we'll be broadcasting it, using it very actively. Unfortunately, we have done nothing of that kind. I now want to give you a bird's eye view of certain efforts by my own institution, CIKS. We have subjected a lot of these Vriksha practices relating to pest control, disease control, seed treatment, increase of yield to test, and they have also developed package of practices for various types of crops. I'll share with you a few experiences. One of the early experiences we have is this is an aerial view of Theosophical Society campus in Chennai. It is a huge forested area, if you can see, about 300 acres of land at the estuary of the Adayar River. We were approached about more than 25 years back by Theosophical Society Garden Superintendent. He said that they have a serious problem with a pest called mango leaf fiddler. The infestation period was from April onwards. It's high in orchards with lesser spacing between trees and there's more shade. The symptoms are that the larvae wet the leaves and completely feed on them. The leaves wither and dry up and drop, so there is no fruit. So he said, look, we don't believe in using any harsh chemicals. We are struggling to control it. You are talking about Ayurveda. Are there any natural products using which you can help us to control this? So we came up with a line of treatment using natural products based on our understanding and wisdom from Ayurveda. The treatment consists of using a mixture of neem oil and Fungal oil that was sprayed, and then also fumigation with two herbs, which are Daru Haritra and Vayuvidam. Each one of these is said to have properties that Ayurveda recognizes as primigna for the control of pest. The result was that the plant growth was enhanced and the yield was very good. Similarly, we had other interesting experiences. We had a mango tree in our old office in CIKS in Chennai, our office compound. It had abnormal leaves, darkened flowers, dropping of flower stalks, and low fruiting. It did not properly fruited for over 10-15 years. The Ayurvedic understanding was that all these indicated a certain severe vitiation of Pitta dosha. So the line of treatment that we did was irrigation with the decoction of what is called as Nalpamara Patte, that is bark of 4 palm trees, goat's meat and milk for a month at weekly intervals. What we found is that the growth is enhanced, the dropping of flowers stopped, and the tree started fruiting. I remember that there was a great deal of excitement. Went to the landlord, we took a basket of fruits and gave it to him. He said, look, I had the tree for 12 to 15 years and it has not fruited at all. From time to time, we used to wonder if we should just get rid of the tree, but you have put a new life to it. We've also done a lot of things like student experiments in pots. Then we have done experiments, field observations, and so on. For example, we had a set of students from botany department of Stella Maris College, which is a local women's college, to test the application of a decoction that is mentioned in Surapara's Ayurveda in enhancing the growth and flowering of a particular plant, that is balsam, which is impatient sultan. I'll just go on to the result. The result was that the decoction was found favorable in all the stages of application. As we apply it in the germinative stage, flowering stage, maximum response was found in the vegetative stage. The use of the above mentioned ingredient can be rationalized from the Ayurvedic point of view, because these substances possess properties that we call as Brahmaniya, which are bulk promoted, and Jivaniya, that are vitalizing. What's very interesting is when we asked the students to present the results, he said something very fascinating. He said we did various experiments. We counted flowers, looked at the area of leaves, calculated the amount of flowering and so on. There were some things we saw that were captured in machines. But then, interestingly, she went on to make a final observation. There are some things that were not easy to capture in machines. The treated plants had a very healthy look and a glow, which we could see. It cannot really be captured in figures. So they also made estimations of comparative cost of treatment of certain agricultural pests and diseases by using the modern chemical method as against the Ayurvedic method. Since this is a mixer audience and not a very specific agriculture related audience, I'm quickly going on to the results. For example, the chemical treatment cost for a particular pest, if it is 1,200 acres using phosphomidone, the biopesticide treatment for the same pest would be in the range of either 180 to 360 rupees per acre, whether you use Adadona Kashayam, Pudina Kashayam, or garlic Kashayam. This includes the cost of raw material, fuel, and labor, which means in a village context, if a farmer is able to access something like Adagoda, which grows wild in many villages, and if he uses his own raw material and fuel, the actual external cost gets cut down quite a bit. Similarly, we have also done experiments for various things such as disease control. We did a collaborative research project with the Department of Pathology of the Agriculture College in Anandamide University in Chidambaram to look at control of fusarial wilt disease that tomato crop. The Vriksha is a prescription of soaking the seeds in fresh goat milk, fumigation with sweet plant that is vacha powder, or combinations of the above. So when this was done, the results were soaking the seeds in milk and fumigating the seeds with vacha alone increased the germination rate and showed resistance against this particular disease, which is the Fusarium wilt. We have also done a lot of experiments with seed treatment. We have done fumigation of specific herbs, soaking in milk, soaking in substances such as cow's urine, panchagavya. We have also fabricated equipment of this kind. When we do a fumigation, we need to be able to optimize the distance between the source of heat or fire and the seeds. If the heat is very intense, it stings or burns the seeds and affects the germination. If the heat is very mild, it's not effective. So we designed equipment of this kind, that is a heating element, a blower, and a fumigator and has separate units. Increase of yield is also something which we have tried. For example, we have made trials with various growth promoters like Triphala Kashayam has been used on crops such as paddy and lady's finger for which can enhance yield. Similarly, we have used barley, sesame, horse bran Kashayam, panchagavim and so on in a variety of crops. They have also come up with package of practices for various crops. They have got out several publications containing practices from the text of Vriksha as well as farmers' practices or folk traditions. For example, you see on your left a publication which talks about organic cotton cultivation, a package of practices. And then to the right, you see Vriksha or Ayurveda for plants. Similarly, we have brought out publications on organic packages for paddy cultivation. We have also brought out individual monographs on specific plant products that are very, very special, such as neem. During the process, we also come across a large number of interesting farmers' practices. This picture shows you a gunny bag with neem cake. This is the practice that we picked up from a farmer's field. Very often in some districts of Tamil Nadu, we have seen farmers have a bori or what we call as a gunny bag, a small gunny bag which they fill with neem seed powder and neem seed cake. They tie it up and put it in the inflow channel through which the water, the irrigation water flows into the rice field. What happens is that as this flows to the neem cake, it soaks up the essence of the neem seed cake or neem seed powder. And the bitter principles in the neem seed cake, neem seed powder serve not only to control the pests, but they are excellent as a source of nutrition for the plants. Similarly, we have looked at practices relating to fumigation or dhupan that is used for controlling pests in the cotton field. Seed treatment using diluted cow's urine is another extensive practice that's already prevailing with the farmers. In fact, we brought out several years back a publication called Use of Animal Products in Traditional Agriculture, a pilot project in southern India. I want to spend a few minutes now telling you something about certain unique Vriksha approaches. For example, can we use Vriksha to look at approaches to search for new biopesticides, as well as to come up with storage forms of biopesticides based on Ayurvedic approaches. Searching for new biopesticides. How do you look and try to identify plants which have biopesticide properties, which may be considered as new plants? We have clues from text, we have clues from farmers, and then we do our own screening. For example, there has been a large number of texts which contain plants which are listed as having properties that are criminal. These include neem, garlic, cedar, ginger, tumbai, fungum, calotropis, andrographic, vitex nigundo, and sweet flag vacha. He has screened various of these plants. There are also very interesting indications that we get from the Lok Parampara farmers' practices. For example, one of the strong indications we have from farmers as to how we can identify a plant as having potentially biophysical properties that they say plants that have extremely bitter taste, plants that are not grazed by cattle, plants, if you snap their leaves or stems, if there is a milky secretion, all these are potentially biopesticide plants. So in fact, we had an interesting case where we have shoot borer of brinjal, shoot borer and some plants such as ladies, very resistant to any pesticide. So our people asked ourselves, can we look at something that's extremely bitter in taste? Is there something that's even more bitter than neem? And the answer is this plant, Andrographis paniculata, which is called as kalme, or in Sanskrit as Bhonimba or Kiratatikta, is extremely bitter. We know that the local Natavitas use it as treatment in snake poison treatment, but the use in agriculture was not known locally. We tested it and we found that it's indeed effective in pests such as shoot borer and building. We've also done work relating to storage forms of biopesticides based on Ayurvedic approaches. Why should we look at storage plants? Today, if you tell farmers that to control a pest, you take so many kilograms of Ayurveda leaves, boil it, filter it, make a kada and use it, there are certain issues. One is the availability of the plant may not be throughout the year. It may not be available everywhere. Farmers are also looking for ready-made alternatives similar to chemical pesticides. For example, there is a generation of farmers now who say, if it's a chemical pesticide, we go buy a bottle, we put it in the tank, dilute it, and then spray it. Instead of doing all this, can you give us a storage form? So this is a challenge. So we said, can we take inspiration from Ayurveda? There are Ayurvedic products that are made for immediate use, like Swarasa or fresh juice. Its lifetime is just one yama or just 3 to 4 hours. There is Kashaya or Kada. If you make a Kada, it just can be stored overnight. You can't use it for more than 1 day. And then there are storage forms. There is Churnam or powder. Akka or distillates can be stored for weeks or months. Taila or oil can again be stored for several months. Asava and Arista, as well as Asava and Arista are fermented products, and Chara is a dry product. Food shelf life goes on to several months to several years. So what we did was, we looked at storage forms of natural products. Can we make natural product derivatives that are similar to things like Asava Arista? Now, the advantages of Ayurvedic approach is that it is non-polluting. We do not require toxic or corrosive solvents and chemicals. There is no requirement of high temperature or pressure. The process is low cost. It is nearly scale neutral. It can be prepared at a kitchen scale or a large scale. Technology for preparation of things like Rashayan, Thailand, or Radishan is very widely known to our people. We are the world's experts in it. So we have done experiments on various promising storage forms. They have, for example, prepared Akka from sweet plant that is Vacha or Garlic, Charam from Calotropis and Adapura, and tested out. Sometimes the question is asked as whether these Ayurvedic treatments cost quite a lot. I'd like to share an anecdote which just gives you some kind of an insight into it from a correspondence that we had with a user of some of our recipes that was more than 25 years back. This gentleman says, I had some trees of Sitafal at our Nashik farm, which were not yielding any fruit for 15 years. The fruit would form but would drop off only after small growth. And this was in spite of using fertilizers and pollutants. After reading Vriksharida, I applied about 1 kilogram of milk together with various pulses, ghee and honey, altogether costing less than ₹50 only once in the last winter of 1984. Within 3 months, I got a record crop of sitafal, which are also extremely delicious. And sharing this to convey that, in spite of the use of certain products that may be considered as exotic or high cost, Ayurveda can indeed, Ayurveda approach can indeed be very affordable. These are just more examples. Some unique Ayurveda approaches I want to tell you about in the concluding part of it. There are certain common approaches underlying plant and human and animal health. There can be rasayana approach to the improvement of plant health. There can be increased potency of formulation using Ayurvedic approach. For example, if you look at plant growth, how can we do further research on plant growth regulation? If you look at plants, sometimes for commercial interest, we harvest the leaves, such as the case of tea crop or green. Sometimes we harvest the fruits, there are many examples. Sometimes we harvest the flowers like rose or jasmine used for perfume. Sometimes we harvest roots and tubers like turmeric, potato, or onion. We have an Ayurvedic understanding of plant growth. Is it possible to carry out detailed investigation to see if we can, using the rasayana approach, enhance the growth quantitatively and qualitatively of specific parts of plants? This is some approach based on which currently we are continuing to do research. In the final section, I want to talk to you a little bit about what are the tasks which we can undertake. In the earlier parts, I've given you an overview of Ayurveda, Ayurveda, what are its source material, what are its content, certain approaches to testing and validation, extensive experiences that we have with respect to pest control, crop protection. Finally, in the last few minutes, I want to talk to you something about certain tasks which I feel can be undertaken as proper. Documentation and publication, education and dissemination, as well as research. There is a need for a systematic survey and assessment of manuscripts on Ayurveda available in India and abroad. Critical editions and good translations are required to make this literature widely accessible. Systematic efforts for documentation from field areas, especially tribal areas or remote areas, is required. The results of valuable experiments need to be widely disseminated. For example, the ICR experiments on testing and validation, it's virtually unknown both to the world of scientists and the world of practitioners. Education and dissemination. There needs to be a syllabus and basic course content for a paper on Ayurveda at the BA level. There are many Ayurvedic practitioners and students themselves who are not very much aware of the rich possibilities of knowledge of something like Ayurveda. Modules of Ayurveda are suitable for students of agriculture, botany, medicinal plant cultivators, gardeners, architects, and landscaping need to be developed. Higher level teaching material in Ayurveda for certificate and diploma courses. Eventually work towards Ayurveda as an area for postgraduate specialization, both for people who have background in agriculture or with Ayurveda. Research needs to be also prioritized. There are promising results leading to crop protection, seed treatment, increasing yield that need to be tested and extensively propagated. We need shortlisting and prioritizing areas for further research. That is, study of metallurgical conditions suited for various agricultural operations, use of plants as indicators of water, minerals, and weather, and so on. Coordinated efforts are required involving Ayurvedic experts and institutions. Ayurvedic approach to the analysis and understanding of diseases and conditions described in modern terminology, and also research on plantation crops, which have a lot of commercial importance. There have been efforts made by Asian Agri Foundation, which have done documentation and testing on traditional agricultural practices with potential for growing plantation crops. Similarly, there have also been some efforts at documenting Ayurveda experiences for the cultivation of organic tea. What are the problems and obstacles that we face One is that the folk tradition is weakened. There is no classical or Shastri tradition that is strong. Translation of textual prescription into practice poses gaps and problems, and a large number of texts of Ayurveda are not readily available. High quality Ayurveda input and involvement is difficult to obtain. Now, there are future prospects and hopes. The existence of a parampara, however weak, is a great blessing. There's a huge difference between a parampara that is completely gone and a parampara that exists but is weakened. Applications and solutions, possibly great commercial value exists. Experiments are easier to design and perform compared to human or animal subjects. In Ayurveda, if I were to design clinical trials for COVID or clinical trials for subjects who have anemia or pregnancy anemia, there are a lot of challenges, ethical concerns, whereas in Ayurveda, they are much easier to perform. The existence of folk or classical traditions is a unique strength of Asia, particularly India. Possible areas for collaboration. What are the areas where we can have collaboration between experts and modern medical, modern facilities? There can be a better strategy for selection of natural products for pest control. There can be analysis of rationale of farmers' practices. There can be research and modification improvements. We can comprehend plant growth and health and disease in Ayurvedic terms. We can test out specific recipes and prescriptions. Research and preparation methods such as Hakam and Chakram and Ayurvedic analysis of disease. Finally, I just want to take you through a few slides reflecting on the current relevance and potential. What's the current relevance and potential? I'd like to highlight in three particular areas: medicinal plants cultivation, sustainable agriculture, as well as providing a new paradigm for agriculture. Let's first look at medicinal plants cultivation. The era of continuous harvesting of medicinal plants from the widest points and Ayurveda and traditional Indian medicine industry has to look towards plantations for future research. We cannot and should not cultivate medicinal plants with chemical packages using urea, phosphates, and chemical pesticides. There are a lot of people who are coming to natural products, Ayurveda, traditional medicine, because it does not use any harsh chemicals. It is, in fact, treating in certain cases problems that are caused due to misuse of chemicals, overuse of chemicals. Doesn't make much sense if you're going to treat them with medicinal plants that are actually cultivated using chemicals. Ayurveda offers a powerful knowledge base for developing organic packages for cultivation of various medicinal plants. Sustainable agriculture, both at the national and global level, an increase in food production is not keeping pace with increasing global population. The purely chemical approach has reached its limit, and problems of sustainability and environmental health concerns are before us. There is a global trend towards acceptance of sustainable organic farming as a way forward. India can emerge very strongly as a global leader, building on indigenous knowledge and wisdom of its heritage. Finally, can this give us a new paradigm for agriculture? The reductionist paradigm of modern agriculture has severe limitations, and organic agriculture seeks a new paradigm. Quite often, people seem to think that organic agriculture is a collection of hotspot recipes. Kabhi kuch hua, kabhi aur kuch hua. Where is the theory? Where is the shastra? So, Ayurveda has a powerful theoretical framework, drawing from Padmabhu Siddhant and Sujosh Vichar. The theoretical framework of Ayurveda offers a powerful alternative paradigm to comprehend plants and health and disease and understand plant growth. I'll end with two quotations. One is an interesting quotation from Professor B. Maheshwari, who is one of India's most distinguished botanists. Over 50 years back, I think this was the context of his address to Indian Science Congress. He said, in fact, even in the modern world, plant power means as much or more than water power, sea power, atomic energy, and so on. For obtaining plants, men have gone forth to the sword to distant lands, set upon long voyages and conquered new lands. And he looks at certain key events in modern or the post-medieval history of the world in terms of its search for plants and plant wealth. What happened when people came in search of indigo, spices, rubber, tea, cotton, and how it influenced the history and course of the world. And finally, I'll end with this beautiful Subhashita sloka. Amantram aksharam nasti, nasti modam anoshadam. Ayogyo purusho nasti, yojagat tatra dullabha. This is a voice from the past telling us and gives us an indication of how our ancestors looked at plants and knowledge about plants. There is no letter that is without the power of a mantra. And similarly, there is no plant or root without a medicinal value. This sums up very beautifully the deep knowledge that our people had about plants and health, plants and disease, in the multiple ways in which they made use of it. Okay, I'll stop my presentation with this, and I welcome questions, comments, any observations from my colleagues or the speakers. Thank you for your patient hearing. I'll conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. With your permission, could we take some questions?
Sure. I think you can go off the slideshow, share more. I see some hand raised. I don't know the question that's been put up on Mr. Namdev or something. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I request the participants to raise hands. Yes, Ajay ji, please go ahead.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Thank you very much for a wonderful session on Vriksha Ayurveda. I just want to know whether Vriksha Ayurveda and organic farming are on the same track, or there are some how we can look both these: organic farming, maybe of medicinal crop or any crop, and Vriksha Ayurveda.
Well, organic farming is based on certain principles that includes sustainability, that includes cyclic processes, that includes a certain amount of balance between plants, humans, and animals. So, organic farming can be consistent with Vriksha Ayurveda, but Vriksha Ayurveda has certain types of emphasis. For example, if you have certain diseases that are afflicting your crops, you can get certain biopesticides from Australia, you can get certain types of homeopathic treatment from Germany and spray it on your crops, and that will be perfectly consistent with organic farming. However, as far as Vriksha Ayurveda approach is concerned, we would emphasize and underline: can you use locally produced resources, locally produced knowledge? Can you build on it? And can you see this is not exclude what comes from outside? So organic farming of a particular kind can be consistent with Vriksha Ayurveda. That's the way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. May I ask Sagar ji to go next?
Sir, namaste.
Namaste.
Sir, could you please throw some light on this Ipomia carnea, which is in general term called tree of Besharam?
What is that? It's called Besharam.
Yeah.
Is it the same as what people call as Congress grass in some places?
Not actually. It is found nearby the muddy or dirty areas.
So I do not know the sense of, and I think I heard Besharam, the name and the origin of the name. I'm told is that it's indiscriminate and it grows everywhere. It's not fussy about what it requires, what it grows everywhere. It seems to be a hardy plant. So I'm not sure what exactly you are wanting to know from me with respect to Besharam.
Actually, it is called morning glory also.
So I do not know in the sense that if you are saying that Vriksha Ayurveda have anything to say about it, I
Okay.
just have to look at where it is known, what the local people say, what the Shastras say. Or if I do not know any of that, I have to look at the plant and see what it does. So in the absence of that, I'm not able to offhand say.
Okay. Okay. No problem, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There are four
May-
participants. It says, "Oh, raise the hand." Please go ahead.
Yes.
Dr. Swati.
Yes, Dr. Swati ji, please go ahead.
Namaste, namaskar, sir.
Namaste.
It's a very informative session. And my question is, sir, today burning of straw is a very serious issue near Delhi and surrounding areas, Punjab, Haryana, after harvesting of rice, wheat. So is there any method in our ancient agriculture practices for their disposal? Parali burning.
Well, actually, if I look at, let's say, let me start with the crop that I'm familiar with, namely paddy. Paddy cultivation in Tamil Nadu, if you see, traditionally the idea is that when a traditional variety of paddy is cultivated, traditional varieties are very tall. They grow anywhere from 5 to 6 feet in height or even more. So the human being cultivates the paddy in partnership with the cattle or the animals. We take the grain and they take the straw. The straw is something that can be used as a nutritious feed for the animal. It is sometimes used for certain things for making thatch and all that. Now there are a few changes that have taken place in recent times because of the interest in cultivating certain kind of hybrids. People have gone to short, stubby kind of varieties, which are not juicy, which are not nutritious for animals. That's one thing. The second thing is we go from harvesting by a human being to harvesting by a tractor or using any mechanical device. Often it gets mixed up with some kind of fuel. It has an off smell, and the cow or the cattle don't come near it and don't touch it at all. So we can't just in isolation look at what should we look at the straw, because if you make certain choices, it has certain consequences. You may not be able to solve it just at the level of what do we do with straw. Why is it that the straw has become useless for anything? How did we choose such a type of straw that we are now landed up with something which cannot complete the cycle and go back to the system? I think the question has to be posed at that level. If possible, one can also take a close look if we say that inevitably for certain reasons, people have certain straw that they feel that the best way to dispose it is burning. One can take a specific look at it, study it, and see the other way to compost it and complete the cycle. I have not done such a thing, but I think it cannot just be at the level of what do we do with the straw. That's only the answer I have.
You mean to say, sir, we should not have choose the technology.
No, I'm not saying we should not have. There may be some things that are let people. For example, there are parts of Tamil Nadu in which people have switched to certain high-yielding varieties. What were they doing 50 years back, 60 years back? They were using traditional varieties of seeds. They were saving and resowing the seeds. The agriculture department today does not scale up and may provide for them traditional varieties of seeds suited to their land. So being pushed to whatever is available, they have switched to certain high-yielding varieties of seeds. And when they switch to certain high-yielding varieties of seeds, it produces certain level of straw. So one can reopen the question also at the level of, can we not get back at least partly or in many areas to other varieties which give straw that has multiple uses and not just that we can't do anything with it but burn it. One has to take a look at it. Only thing I'm saying that cannot be just a level of what can we do with the straw. Like if we landed with the straw at the first phase also should be looked at. But we can also take a look at the straw because there is a lot of literature as to how to compost material that is resistant to composting, how to compost material that is difficult to compost by adding certain herbs, etc. Yes, that's also possible. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a ready-made answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
May I ask Ranjana ji to go next?
Namaste, sir. I am from computer engineering background. I don't know much about this agriculture. But I want to ask you, somewhere I read that if pouring water to plants, if we recite mantras, it affects the growth of plant and it grows fast. So is it music therapy is useful to grow up the plant?
I have seen two things. There are some Riksha texts that say that for protection against specific pests, you can chant some mantras, write them in leaves, or put it near the plants. I have not had opportunity to personally observe or test it. Similarly, I have heard certain people make claims to the effect that if Agnihotra is recited in the neighborhood of plants or where they cultivate crops, it protects the crops against pests and diseases and improves plant yield. I have not been able to substantiate this in the sense that in two cases where, in one case where specifically such a claim was made, I took a close and hard look at the evidence that they presented. And whatever evidence they had to me, it was not convincing. It needs to be further looked at. It looked like even before they had looked at it, they were convinced that Agnihotra is a good thing. Agnihotra, that may be a good thing for various reasons, but I didn't find evidence on the ground to substantiate that it improved plant growth or protected against pests. That needs to be looked at, but there are some very challenging aspects in terms of design of experiments. How do you look at it, etc. Yeah.
Thank you. Namaste.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have Dr. Sumanji next. Please go ahead now.
Namaskar, sir.
Namaste.
Rust and smut disease are most common in whole India. How the rust and smut disease of wheat control in Vriksha Ayurveda? Any special method or the traditional method which used in the rust and smut disease of wheat or the other cereals, which is most common in North India?
See, the thing is that when you give the name of a disease in terms of modern disease category or rust or smut,
Yes,
one has
yes.
to take a close look at it and see what Ayurveda entity it corresponds to. This is something like, for example, if somebody says, is there treatment for COVID in Ayurveda? In the Ayurvedic Granthas, they will not mention the word COVID. The word COVID, even in modern medicine, is hardly 3 or 4 years old, or SARS approach, maybe 3 to 5 years old. What we have to do is to look at the symptom complex. How does it affect the plant? What kind of problem does it lead to? What kind of dhatu is disturbed? What kind of dosha is disturbed? And based on that, make a prescription. So if you say that there is a particular plant that suffers from rust disease,
Yes,
we have
yes.
to look at the specific situation and see if Ayurveda can suggest a line of treatment. In our case, most of our experimental work, practical work with farmers has been in Tamil Nadu, where we have extensive experience with the rice crop, certain vegetables, and certain kind of oil seeds and pulses. We have not had experience ourselves to look at diseases associated with wheat crop, but it
Yes,
can
yes.
be done. I cannot straight away tell you this is the solution, but we have to look at it and like we have done for rice crop, for brinjal, root and shoot borer. One has looked at solutions. It's possible to look at, though often I'm not able to say do this because we are not looked at it ourselves.
Okay, okay. In smut disease, that is the food grains are affected. Food grains become the black colors powder.
You mean it's food grain means the storage after
Food
it is
grains.
harvested and stored, is it?
Yes, yes.
It's a storage pest, is it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so one has to look at
And
it.
caused by fungi, Puccinia. These diseases are caused by fungi
See, in the
and
case,
mostly, yes, yes.
no, in the case of rice, for example, when we harvest and store paddy, there are a
Yes.
variety of strategies we use. For example, one of the things we use is fumigation or dhupan.
Okay,
Fumigation
okay.
is used in the storage area, and fumigation is done with certain herbs. Like it may be with adadora dry leaves, it may be with bacha, it may be with certain other herbs. That is one thing. Second thing is even before the storage, there may be exposure to sunlight or alternate drying and exposure to sunlight. There are varieties like this that we have worked out for the paddy crop. In the case of wheat growth, we personally do not have experience. We'll have to look at it. It's possible to look at it, sure.
Any special method in the Vriksha Ayurveda for the fungal diseases of the plants?
Fungus is not a category that is recognized in Ayurveda. We'll have to look at what is the dosha that is afflicted, what is the dhatu that is afflicted. This is like going to a modern medical doctor and saying, if I go to an orthopedic surgeon and say, for Sandhivata, do you have any treatment? He will say, Sandhivata ka kuch matlab nahi hai. Sandhivata is not a category that a modern orthopedic surgeon understands or knows. So he said, let me see the patient, I'll have to see, I'll do my own tests and diagnosis. So in that sense, frankly, fungus is not. Though in a general sense, I can say certain fungal diseases of plants. We found that diluted cow's urine has been useful in many fungal diseases of plants. So that's not a universal prescription. We can't say that's a Ramban for every fungal disease. Let's look at the specific.
Okay. That is a dosa. The disease are related to the dosa. What
And the
is the
dhatus. Dosha and the dhatu. What is the
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a question in the chat box, sir. May I read it out to you?
Yeah, I'm also trying to answer the chat box. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the question from Dr. Sheetal Ji.
Yeah.
She says, can we get a few tips for terrace farming? How to take the decision on what to grow and whether Vriksha Ayurveda principles can be used there?
Can be. We have produced even monographs on that, but I can't offhand give you any tips. For example, one of the things that has happened interestingly during this COVID period is there is a huge surge of interest in home gardening, saying that let's grow our own plants, let's do our own terrace plants, let's grow our own plants. So it's not possible often to just say 1, 2, 3. I'll have to say in which part of the country are you? If you are in Chennai or if you are in Tamil Nadu, something may hold. If you are in Mumbai or if you are in Nashik, something may hold. Which part of the year are you starting? So yes, it is possible to even produce certain monographs on that. But there's not anything which I can tell you straight away saying do 1, 2, or 3 in a talk like this. No, that would be possible. But there are extensive tips in terms of growing of plants in houses, even in restricted areas, even in pots. They even use terms like Vamana Vriksha, which in today's terms people would call as bonsai cultivation of plants. Yes, there are indications like this. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have a question from Mansi ji in the chat box. She asks, I would like to ask that if this immense power of plants be properly utilized and educated among masses, then would it be possible to replace the chemical fertilizers and pesticides?
In a phased manner, in a proper manner, it should be. It cannot be just our sentiment. For example, we have to look at the ground reality. If you look at if you visit the website of the Lok Sabha, about 2 or 3 years back, there is a Murli Manoj Joshi committee heading, Committee on Estimates Relating to Organic Farming. If you look at the report, it says that every year, the government of India provides subsidies worth 80,000 crores only for the use of chemical fertilizers alone. Every year, subsidies worth 80,000 crores just for the use of chemical fertilizers alone. On top of that, there are huge ways in which the government subsidizes chemical agriculture. It also subsidizes education with chemical agriculture. For example, my small NGO, Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, has been in existence for 26 years. We hire people with bachelor's degree in agriculture, master's degree, PhD, diploma in agriculture. No matter what background degree they have, sustainable agriculture is something on which they had to be educated after we hire them. Because every single university, every single research institute, every single school of agriculture in India is training people only on chemical farming. Sometimes, by chance, they may have some background of sustainable agriculture because of some family background, which means the state is subsidizing education in chemical agriculture massively. So if you are saying, can we make a complete switch to organic, we have to look deep into it, we have to ask. And today, if I want to do chemical farming, all the inputs I require for chemical army, phosphate, urea, chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, potash, hybrid seeds, I can buy it off the shelf in the market, either really or notionally. If I have the money, I can buy. If I want to do organic farming, if I want to buy, say, neem seed powder or oil seed cake or vermicompost, it's simply not available in sufficient quantity or satisfactory quality because the state is not supporting, so it is not equipped anybody to do that. Yes, it's possible to do, but we have to look deep into it and reorganize our entire system for supporting agriculture, educating on agriculture, input for agriculture, everything. Only then.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question from Subhash Yadav ji. Namaste, sir. Is there any Vriksha Ayurvedic perspective of genetically modified crops and vegetables? What is your personal understanding of this technology?
Vriksha is that, Vriksha is the text talk about certain things which may be broadly considered as botanical marvels. We have not looked into it or we have not looked deep into it. With respect to genetically modified crops, I feel that we need to observe a lot of caution, lot of risks, and to see if such dangerous technologies are needed. For example, just to give you an idea of the type of dangers that may be posed by genetically modified crop, as against, let us say, even chemical pollution. Today, let us say if I release a genetically modified crop, which proves to be problematic in terms of a kind of disease it's susceptible to, if I plant it in 1 acre, it can, because of its propagation, go on to propagate itself into 100 acres or 1,000 acres or even 100,000 acres because its living material is possible. As against this, let's say, supposing I have a car that is manufactured defectively. Let us say that the Ford Motor Company puts in market some car and they find that 100,000 cars are defective. They can recall the 100,000 cars. The 100,000 cars will not go on and multiply to become 200,000 cars. The 100,000 cars will not spread their defect to Fiat, they will not spread their defects to Tata Indica. Whereas all these are possible with genetically modified organisms. So I think that before we go on to genetically modified crops as a solution for anything, we have to convince ourselves that what we call as sustainable agriculture, traditional agriculture, or even traditional approaches for plant breeding, we have to convince ourselves that it cannot solve that. And then we'll have to ask ourselves the question if it is safe. There is no case, in my opinion, to go in for genetically modified crops in India for anything, either food crops or not food crops. We have made submissions to the government of India on this matter, in fact.
Thank you, sir. Mansi ji would like to follow up on her question. I would request her to unmute.
Sir, namaskar. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Sir, thank you very much for your answer. Sir, I myself wanted to tell that I am from the field of chemistry and I teach my students this topic, fertilizers. So in this topic, when we teach, we tell them the advantages and disadvantages of using fertilizers. So now with the answer that you just mentioned here, and this power which I am myself feeling after your presentation, what should I suggest my students to read other than the textbooks that they read? What should I suggest them to go for? Other than the textbook knowledge only, what should I suggest them to read for other than fertilizers related to this?
You teach chemistry to students of, you teach about fertilizers to students of agriculture.
So it is only to students of chemistry honors, BSc chemistry honors.
So you're saying you're teaching them about fertilizers. So you're asking me what else can you teach them?
Sir, we suggest them books only, related to what fertilizers are. I want to, just change the route now and tell them what Vriksha Ayurveda is all about.
Actually, we have to come to the sad conviction that as a nation, we are not invested sufficiently in building capacity, in building resources, building human resources in it. So right now, the only thing you can do is that you can suggest to them, those who are really interested, to read articles in certain journals like Asian Agri-History, to read certain books that are produced by agencies like Asian Agri-History. But if you have to make it more extensively published, more extensively available in various languages, we as a nation have to invest for a generation. We have to quite a bit in that. There is no easy solution to that saying overnight you can do this. If people are interested, they can make a start. That's all.
Right, sir. All right. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Could we take one more question? With
Sure,
your
I'm
permission?
fine with it. It's 10:20, but I'm fine. You can keep manage the time.
Right, sir. So we have Dr. Rajat ji next. Please go ahead, sir.
Sir, namaste.
Namaste.
We have experienced that whenever we have gone for some insecticide or pesticide, it inevitably engenders a kind of imbalance in the biodiversity, in the ecosystem. Has there been any study as to what should be the percentage of success of a particular insecticide so that biodiversity will not be disturbed? And we should not kill all the insects completely with a view to completely ridding of all diseases from the plants. So has there been any study? Otherwise, this will be again lopsided. So has there been any study as to what percentage should be left for consumption by insects or pests?
Well, I think, yeah, that's a very interesting question. I put it this way that we'll start with understanding that pest is an economic definition and not a biological definition. For example, if you live in a 2-bedroom apartment and in that entire apartment there are 6 cockroaches, you don't have a pest problem, I would say. But if in a kitchen there are 200 cockroaches running around, you have a pest problem.
Exactly.
So if you say, is cockroach a pest? I would say it depends. So in a similar sense, in nature, what we will find is that there are a lot of organisms in mutual balance. We have had this experience in rice growing areas in Tamil Nadu, like Rangapatnam district, that people are aggressively killing all snakes. Sometimes there are thickets and bushes where snakes used to take refuge. People cleared that and then they kill snakes. After a while, they find there's a huge surge in the population of rats. What was happening before? The snakes were keeping the population of rats in check. Now that they have cleared the snakes completely, the rat population is out of control. So actually, in a similar sense, if we are using a pesticide, one of the things we have to say is how powerful a broad spectrum it is and how balanced it is. For example, there are a lot of organisms in a rice field that are benign to the rice plant, like spiders. Spiders don't eat the rice plant, but they eat a lot of pests. If you spray certain strong insecticides, that may affect the spider population adversely. If so, the pest population, there is a resurgence. So one has to look at every single situation separately because the types of beneficial organisms and predators and various ecosystems are different. But in general, for example, some of the indicators are you have to see that the population of certain predators like spiders should not be affected adversely. The pollinators like honeybee as well as the butterflies should not be affected because if the population of pollinators is affected, it affects your crop and crops all around you. That's one of the great dangers. So one has to maintain a balance. That's all I see. There's no particular prescription apart from saying that you should see once the balance is restored, if it continues in a balanced way, or if you see sudden surge in population of certain pests that didn't even exist before, then that gives you a signal that you have done certain wrong thing. You have to go back to collect the balance.
Yes. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Just checking if there are any more questions with the participants.
Actually,
We have also addressed all the questions in the chat box. And looks like we don't have any further questions, sir. Thank you so much for sharing all the knowledge today on Vriksha Ayurveda. It was very enriching and new for me, and I'm sure for all of us as well. Thank you so much once again, sir. Dhanyavad.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I'll also be sharing some article for one of the references as requested by the organizer shortly. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. We will archive it and make it available for all of them.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. So the next session will start at 11 a.m. on Ayurveda, and we will be having Vaidya P. Ram Manohar Ji with us. So we have around half an hour, 30-35 minutes break. Looking forward to the next session. Thank you so much. Before we break, just a small announcement. I'm so sorry. We will have the midterm presentations after the next session. That is from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. Dr. Richa Chopra will be joining us then, and then we will have the presentations from all of you. We have received some of your, some of you have sent the presentations over mail. We have received them, and we are looking forward to your presentations as well. Thank you so much.
Hello, Namaskaram Ram Manohar ji.
Namaste, namaste. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Would you like to just do a test of your slides?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll just try to share my slides.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, is it visible?
Yes, yes, it's visible. It's visible.
Oh, okay, so I'll stop.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
With
think there's some more time, so I'll
yeah,
be in
yeah.
the
We have about
background.
13 minutes left. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'll join. I'll come back at 11. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Okay. Thank you. Namaskaram. Namaskaram to all participants. Namaskaram, Dr. P. Ram Manoharji. We are extremely grateful to have you here at this 12th day of the Faculty Development Program. The Vishaya for today is India's knowledge systems with respect to health and life sciences, and what better way to explore IKS than Ayurveda, and extremely grateful to have you here. I would just like to introduce you. I have the privilege of introducing you, sir. Dr. P. Ram Manoharji has received the BA MS and MD in Ayurveda degrees from Bharatiya University, Coimbatore, and Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bengaluru, respectively. He has been contributing in the field of Ayurvedic research since the last 30 years. He was the principal investigator on the Indian side of the National Institute of Health at US sponsored research study to scientifically evaluate the efficacy of Ayurveda in rheumatoid arthritis. The outcomes of this study was published in the Annals of Rheumatic Diseases and Journal of Clinical Rheumatology and won the prestigious Excellence in Integrative Medicine Research Award. He is participating in cancer initiatives for development of integrative oncology in collaboration with Central Council for Research in Ayurvedic Sciences and National Cancer Institute, US. He has, to his credit, more than 100 publications, including research papers published in peer-reviewed indexed research journals, as well as contributions in chapters for several books. He has participated in more than 20 major international conferences and over 100 national conferences. He served twice in the Communications Committee of the International Conference on Integrative Medicine and Health, ICIMH. He was honored with the Ayurveda Marga Pravartaka Award by the L. Mahadevans Ayurveda Foundation in 2014, and the Vaidya Sundarlal Joshi Smriti Sodha Puraskara by the Maha Gujarat Medical Society in 2015. He is presently serving as the Research Director at Amrita Center for Advanced Research in Ayurveda, Achara, attached to the Amrita School of Ayurveda, managed by Amrita University. Thank you so much, sir, for coming here. And without further ado, I hand over the session to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome and introduction. I'm very happy to be here today and to share some insights and thoughts about, the tradition of Ayurveda, which is the indigenous healthcare system of India, and which has a remarkable evolutionary history spanning, many thousands of years. And in fact, we can't really trace the origins of Ayurveda. That itself speaks of its antiquity, because we can't see through the mists of time. Even when the first textbooks of Ayurveda that we have today, they're already very well organized and a systematized form of knowledge, which presupposes that there were, traditions existing even before, which these texts represent. But we are not able to, study them because they are really lost in the, the flow of time. But the most remarkable thing is that Ayurveda continues to be a living tradition, and it is also staging a kind of resurgence globally, and that is quite fascinating. And I think that's very fascinating about the Indian civilization also, that it has this kind of resilience and has shown this timeless nature of its fundamental principles and tenets. So I will be making use of a slide to have our discussion so that we are focused. So let me just, yes. Are you all able to see the slides now? Yes. So our focus is today looking at Ayurveda as a knowledge system, especially India's health and life sciences category. And for this matter, Ayurveda, the word Ayurveda itself in one sense means, the knowledge of life, or we can even translate it as life science. And this is quite an interesting aspect of this term, because if you look at other medical systems, they are mostly known as, Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, or traditional European medicine, Western medicine. It's very interesting that the word Ayurveda does not mean medicine at all. Ayurveda means the knowledge of life, the insight into life. So that shows that Ayurveda has a very broad, focus and perspective. It's looking at life itself. And the actual goal of Ayurveda is to make the best out of life, for which health is an indispensable tool. This makes the focus of Ayurveda very different from other medical systems, where the entire focus is only on, managing a disease. And especially today, the focus of medicine is very much restricted to managing a disease. Our focus is not as much as on, developing health or improving the quality of life by using health as a resource. We have to reach higher levels of well-being. So health and well-being is really not given that much attention in today's medical practice. It's very curative oriented. And there is also this irony. If you look at countries like the United States, it's well understood that amongst the diseases that cause mortality and morbidity of the human population, non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, figure at the top. At least 70% of the healthcare burden can be attributed to non-communicable diseases like heart disease, cancer, respiratory illnesses and diabetes. These 4 or 5 disease categories account for nearly 70% of the global healthcare burden. And this shows that, the solution is for the future also, making people more responsible for their own health. And we cannot solve all these problems with only medicine. And it's very, very interesting and shocking to also realize that in the United States, the number 1 killer is cardiovascular disease. The number 2 is cancer. And the number 3 is medical treatment. Now, this is the most shocking revelation. This is a very honest confession. This preoccupation on curative medicine has led to unnecessary medical interventions and prescription of medicines that is actually becoming counterproductive. So it is a matter of serious concern that the third leading cause of mortality in many parts of the world is actually medical intervention. So this is the context in which Ayurveda assumes significance. With Ayurveda, we are not talking about a competition with Western medicine. Western medicine has progressed in many areas and we have many new possibilities of medical interventions, but it is sometimes lopsided and the focus is too much on curative medicine. And here Ayurveda brings us a fresh perspective, looking at life in totality, looking at other goals of positive well-being, positive concepts about health. And that is what I would like to focus here today. So Ayurveda has been codified through the centuries. I mean, it is a very scholarly tradition. Most of the time we look down upon Ayurveda as, folk medicine or Natu Vaidyam, as sometimes we refer to, indicating it's not so organized, it's just folklore knowledge. But it's very important to know that Ayurveda has been codified in a very structured and rigorous manner. Ayurvedic textbooks are masterpieces of technical writing. And some of the most old ancient textbooks like the Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Kashyapa Samhita, Bhela Samhita, these are all, highly developed and systematized accounts of medical knowledge that even today look very modern and appealing. And all of these have also gone through a long process of editing. In fact, if you look at the Charaka Samhita, I don't think there's any textbook in the world that survived, 3,000, more than 3,000 years, and it is still being used. Because you have a few editions of textbooks today, most of them would date to maybe a few hundred years. But here we have a textbook that is thousands of years, has been updated, edited, and evolved. That's also very important. When we look at Ayurvedic texts, it's not that they were just written for once and then, no changes happened. The Charaka Samhita was originally, a student's handbook. That is also very interesting. The Charaka Samhita was a student's handbook, which was later developed, enlarged, and revised and updated. And this process itself took several centuries. And that is how even the Sushruta Samhita also has a similar history of long-term editing. And if you look at the Ayurvedic text writing, even in the whole Indian tradition, it was Ayurveda that contributed creating the rules for technical writing. Today, we know that when we write a research paper, we need to follow certain formatting. For technical writing, there are some codes. And this is seen in Ayurveda. These codes are called as the Tantra Yuktis, the rules for technical writing. And it's quite fascinating to see that these are actually described mainly in the Ayurvedic text, which means that the tradition of Ayurveda actually contributed to the development of technical writing in India. Apart from Ayurveda, we see a reference to these Tantra Yuktis in the Arthashastra of Kautilya and also the Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. But otherwise, the most elaborate descriptions are seen in the classical Ayurvedic textbooks. And the formats, there are different formats for writing Ayurvedic texts. So we have Samhitas, which are compendiums. We have Nikandus, which are medical lexicons, materia medica. We have sutras or aphorisms, which are very, very brief and concise summaries of fundamental concepts in Ayurveda. We have glossaries, vyakhyas or elaborations, commentaries, formularies, monographs. So the Ayurvedic literature. So this is a very fascinating thing. And it's quite painful to know that, the entire scientific literature in India and even the medical literature, less than 10% of it has actually been explored, has actually been studied or transcribed or translated. 90% of these manuscripts are, languishing in the manuscript repositories. They have not been studied for want of scholarship. They are written in various scripts, and only we can say that the major textbooks have been studied and transcribed, but we still do not have an idea of the breadth and depth of knowledge that has actually been preserved through the medical tradition of Ayurveda. It can easily be one of the richest medical literature existing in the world, and it is a pity that we have not explored it or brought it to the limelight in a complete and comprehensive manner. So here I would like to demonstrate through this picture of how extensive this literature is. This is just an indicative. So here you can see the whole map of India, and here is the cross-section of a tree. This indicates the time, the annular rings in the tree indicating the major chronological time periods, and here the geographical breadth and length of the country. And what I have put here is only very indicative. If you were to place all the Ayurvedic textbooks based on the geographical location and the time period in which they were written, we can see we will not be able to see the map of India. Every region in our country has contributed to the development of the medical knowledge. So you can trace them to every nook and corner of India. In every nook and corner, in every small village, somebody was writing a medical manuscript at all time periods. So every time period, chronological landmark, we can see a new textbook was written. Knowledge was updated. And this was a pan-Indian contribution, the entire country. And with the textbooks like Charaka Samhita talk about visitors from outside also. So the then globe, the then world participated and contributed to the development and codification of Ayurvedic knowledge. So this is the chronogeographical spread. So this is the wealth of the medical tradition that we have inherited. And I thought to begin our discussion, this is kind of the background situation. Now, if you look at a time lapse, this is something which has not been brought into the highlight. Today, when we talk about the development or evolution of medicine, we trace it to Hippocrates and the Western, medical tradition. But parallelly, many other medical systems existed at that time, and they had exchange of knowledge, and we have not really brought to focus the unique contributions. Even Chinese system is quite old, and Indian and Chinese medical systems, Ayurveda also had a lot of exchanges. So if you were to look at a timeline of and it's very difficult to fix and identify these timelines because, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are unable to trace the roots of the origin of Ayurveda. But you can see there are many, many important landmarks, breakthroughs in medical theory and practice that we can attribute to Ayurveda from the BCE. I mean, before the Common Era, many thousands of years before the Common Era. And one of the first, even in the Vedic period, what we see is the concept of zoopharmacognosy. How by observing nature, by observing animal life, we can get the first clues about the medicinal properties of plants and substances. You know, in the Atharva Veda, there is a saying, Varaho Veda Bheshajam, Nakulo Veda Bheshajam. The mongoose knows, the boar knows, the eagle knows, let these medicines come to me for my help. Today, this way of learning is called as zoopharmacognosy. Zoopharmacognosy means animals have that instinctual knowledge of, you know, what is medicinal and what can be used as medicine. It's very interesting to see that I think in the university in New Mexico, the researchers found a strange sight. They found that sparrows were picking up cigarette butts that were thrown by people who were smoking, and they were carrying it. And the researchers were surprised. They were wondering why the sparrow should pick up tobacco, you know, from the cigarette butts. And when they followed the sparrows, they found these sparrows were going and opening the cigarette butts and lining their, you know, nests with the tobacco inside the cigarette butts. And this was very surprising. Later, they found that the eggs were being attacked by a certain parasite, and this nicotine, this tobacco had that particular chemical which could repel these parasites. Now, for a human being to discover this correlation, that, you know, in the tobacco, there is a chemical that can prevent this parasite, without any laboratory, without any scientific investigation, the sparrows could know it just by instinct. This is the power of zoopharmacognosy. What for a human scientist would have perhaps taken a century of efforts, you know, so many sophisticated experiments trying to, it doesn't even look theoretically possible that we can ever find, you know, first you must get the idea that tobacco has something which can work against a parasite. Even to get to that idea is, you know, very, very challenging. So this is what, even in human discovery of science, we call this a serendipity. Like Alexander Fleming accidentally discovered, you know, that the fungus had an antibiotic property. So this is, Ayurveda acknowledges that this is one of the sources through which this knowledge emerged, zoopharmacognosy. We can see that even in the pre-Vedic origins of Ayurveda. And it's very fascinating to see that in Ayurvedic tradition, there has been a discussion on when you give a medicine, is the medicine really working, or, you know, is it a chance effect? This is what modern statisticians are today asking. Did the medicine really work, or was it just chance effect? So in statistics, we use the p-value to show the probability, whether the outcome was due to chance or due to the effect of the medicine. And you can see that this Ayurveda scientists were debating this, you know, in the BCE, several thousands before the Common Era. In Charaka Samhita tells that if you treat a patient and he gets better, and if you cannot prove that it was due to your medicine, then it is accidental success. So you can imagine there is also this distinction. Ayurveda was perhaps one of the earliest medical systems to distinguish between psychological effect and effect of a drug. Ayurveda acknowledged that just by influencing the mind of a person, you can bring about a medical effect. And this needs to be distinguished. A drug will work because of the drug's pharmacological effect, but even a sham or a make-believe medicine or a mantra, or, you know, you can also influence a patient's mind and bring about the same effect, and the medicine may not have any role to play. This is also a big debate and question in medical research today. And it's quite fascinating to see that old textbooks like Charaka Samhita talk about this. And Ayurveda is based on cause and effect relationships, which is called as Karya Karana Bandha, that for every effect, there is a cause. And by identifying the cause, we can change the effect. This is the theoretical basis of Ayurveda. So it is not superstition, or, you know, it's based on understanding cause and effect chain and relationships. And Ayurveda also talks about the possibility of developing newer and newer medicines. Jagatyevam anaushadham. There is nothing in this world which is having no medicinal property. If you have the eye to look at it, you can discover medicine from almost anything. So the Sushruta Samhita says, Nadishu Chaileshu Sarassu Chapi, Vanyeshu Aranyeshu Tathashrameshu, Sarvatra Sarva Parimargidavya, Sarvatra Bhumiri Vasuni Dhate. This earth is abounding in resources that can be used as medicine. So Sushruta says, Nadishu, search in the rivers, even in water sources. Today we are talking about oceans. Nadishu Shaileshu, look in the rivers, look in the mountains, look in the seas, look in the forests, look everywhere, because this earth abounds in resources and it's full of medicines. So Ayurveda says that there's no end to developing new medicines. Ayurveda also talks about new diseases. This is very fascinating, because many times when we study Ayurveda, they tell that we have listed only the diseases that are prevalent at this time, but there could be new diseases in the future. And Ayurveda tells us how you can study new diseases and how you can develop new treatments for new diseases. So you can see this is scientifically a very progressive approach. And Ayurveda talks about developing new protocols. Today, when we got affected by COVID, we talked about, repurposing. And Ayurveda was one of the first medical systems to talk about repurposing old medicines for new diseases, how you can modify them, how you can adapt them to deal with new conditions. And new formulations. The physician was supposed to be creative and develop new treatments, new protocols, because according to Ayurveda, every person deserves a new treatment protocol, because Ayurveda is individualized. So there is no end to developing new medicines. If a new person is born, everything is unique for that individual. So there is no limit to creativity. And Ayurvedic textbooks have also updated the disease classification, pharmacopoeia. So we see a very dynamic tradition. There are also developments of new theories, and this I've just tried to capture very briefly some of the, just to highlight, that we had a very robust, scientific, progressive, questioning medical tradition, and which continuously evolved over a time period, even while it kept some of the most fundamental concepts, very stable. Ayurveda says that, a good knowledge system has a 3-tier structure: Tattva, Shastra, and Vyavahara. So Tattva means principles, the truth in nature, which nobody can change. So we are only discovering what is there in nature. We are not creating anything new. So at the level of Tattva, as long as nature does not change, Tattva will not change. But our understanding of the Tattva may change. That is the Shastra. So this is a very interesting concept, which you can see in the Ayurvedic tradition. The laws of nature, which are immutable, Ayurveda considers to be unchangeable, because otherwise science is not possible. If nature keeps changing its laws, no prediction would be possible. So Ayurveda accepts that Tattva, or thatness. But our understanding, theorizing these principles in nature, may change over time to a certain extent. We can better understand. So that is the Shastra. And the applications are called as Vyavahara. So Tattva, Shastra, and Vyavahara. Behind every application and intervention, there is a Shastra or a theory. Behind every theory, there is a principle in nature, which we can actually, verify and experience. So this is the 3-tier structure of Ayurveda, which gave it stability and flexibility at the same time. We believe that the fundamental framework can remain unchanging, but on the other side, you can keep rebuilding on that foundation. So we had a very stable and flexible knowledge system in Ayurveda. And I think compared to many other knowledge systems, this idea of structured technical writing and structured organization of knowledge is very well articulated in the tradition of Ayurveda. Now, I have put many concepts in the slides today, which is also for extra reading. We won't be able to cover all the topics I have in my slides in the short period, but I included more topics so that you can read them after our discussion. for your own better understanding and deeper understanding. And I've also given a link where you can look up additional reading material so that, if you're more interested to explore, you can read more. And I want to also say that when you study reading materials of Ayurveda, we must take everything with a pinch of salt, because, it's like the story of the elephant and the 5 blind men. Don't take any view as complete and final, because Ayurveda is quite complex. It is multifaceted, and different people have looked at it from their own perspective. So you may be able to see a scientist, when he looks at Ayurveda, he sees it in a particular way. A historian may have seen it in a particular way. A Western historian may look at Ayurveda from the viewpoint of Greek medicine. An Indian historian may look at it in a different way. So that warning I would like to give: when you are looking at these reading materials, please look at the background of the author. But you can stitch all these views together and get a more complete understanding. And that is what I want to also lay a foundation here, that Ayurveda is quite vast, and it has not been completely understood. Because, in Ayurveda, we have spirituality also, we have science also. Ayurveda is a good blend of science and spirituality, the inner world and the outer world. A scientist may find that to be religion and may consider that as, more primitive, but that is not correct, because what we have in Ayurveda is not religion, but it is spirituality. It is an understanding of our own consciousness, which today should be classified under consciousness studies and not just as, religious rituals. So I will highlight some of those points. Now, if you look at what Ayurveda can contribute, what is Ayurveda in a nutshell? I would say that Ayurveda is first and foremost nature-centered medicine. I want to highlight this because many people talk about Ayurveda as person-centered medicine. This is a very anthropocentric worldview. Ayurveda does not conform to that. Ayurveda clearly tells us that unless nature is balanced, we cannot be balanced. And this is something which is so relevant today. And we know about the climate summit and all the challenges. People are supposedly saying that we have taken big measures, but when it comes to implementation, one of the biggest tragedies of modern civilization is that we don't have this nature-centered view. I mean, we are completely destroying nature, and even the COVID-19 pandemic is an example of what can happen if we disturb the balance in nature. So, according to Ayurveda, nature being healthy is a very essential prerequisite, for us also to be healthy, because it is our interaction with nature that determines, the outcomes of our physiology. If we are living in an environment where life cannot be supported, that is unfortunately what we are creating today. And Ayurveda says that Purushoyam Loka Sameta, the human being is an epitome of the universe. Whatever is there in the universe is there in us also, the macrocosm and the microcosm. The microcosm is a miniature macrocosm. And this is what we study in Ayurveda, that Srishti, we are first made, in modern medicine, when we study anatomy. It's a very anthropocentric approach to studying medicine. Everything is human-centered. You see a dead body and start your study of medicine. In one serial called The Mentalist, I found, it's an American serial, but it's very interesting. There was a dialogue. The mentalist is identifying a quack physician, and he says this doctor is a quack because she has compassion. And this is really interesting, because what he points out is that in today's medical education in the US, it's impossible for a doctor to develop compassion, because in the very first year, you are thrown before a dead body and a pile of books, and there you become insensitive. It's a very bad idea to start the study of medicine by dissecting a dead body where there is no life anymore. You become insensitized. You don't learn to respect life. What Ayurveda says is that we study about human body by first studying the universe, the macrocosm, Srishti Chariram. The universe is giving birth to the microcosm. This is the idea that the first idea that a medical student should have. And so in Ayurveda, we do Srishti Shariram and Garbha Shariram. This is first what the medical student has to learn, how the universe gives birth to the microcosm. So we start by seeing a new life. Childbirth is what Ayurveda says a medical student should start by understanding, because then you begin to respect life. Shariram, the Ayurvedic concept of studying about the human body, begins with birth and ends in death. So first you appreciate what is life. You behold the miracle of the creation of life, and you see nature and the person. The person is connected to nature, and that nothing, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, everything is, provided by nature. And this, secondly, we become person-centered. And this is very interesting concept here, that, what is unique about life is that if you look at what we are made up of, we are all made of the same ingredients: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, same elements, same amino acids, same nucleic acids. There's no difference. If we were to break us down into the components, we are all same. But yet we know we are also different. So what makes us different? It's just the configuration. So nature provides the same raw materials, it's equal. But how these raw materials are configured, even the whole of life, it's the same four nucleic acids which creates the DNA from the first living form to the humans. There's no difference. But just because of the way they are configured, we become unique. So when you look at person-centered medicine, Ayurveda tells us how we are so unique in spite of being made out of the same ingredients. And knowing our uniqueness gives us the right perspective in life. We have to understand that there is nobody like us in this universe. And by understanding our uniqueness, we know what is our signature, our life's signature. And expressing our uniqueness is the way for fulfillment, for not only of our individual life, but that is the best way we can contribute to the whole of society itself. This is what in the Bhagavad Gita is also referred to as Swadharma. Swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. So Ayurveda says that because we are all unique, and that's what Ayurveda explains to as our Prakriti, as each person has its signature configuration, which gives us a certain uniqueness. And once we discover our uniqueness, our life becomes so meaningful, so focused, and our whole goal is to express our uniqueness. Leave that signature of our life. That is the goal of our life. That is the contribution that we have to make. And everybody has a unique signature and a unique role or function to play. So nature-centered medicine, then person-centered medicine. And then Ayurveda is all about integration of lifestyle, diet, and medicine. Ayurveda points out that health is an individual's responsibility. There is a very interesting statement in some of our old textbooks, like Parishramo Mitaharo Bhugada Vashvina Viva. Parishrama is, physical activity. Mitahara is controlled diet. These are like the Ashwini Devas on earth. And if you follow these two principles, there is no need to see a physician. There was a time when physicians were paid only if society was healthy. If anybody became sick, their pay would be cut. That was the responsibility of the old physician. Today, we have created a medical culture which makes profits out of a person's illness and sickness. I'm just telling some of the fundamental concepts in Ayurveda may make us think differently, because when we study Ayurveda, we are asked to pray. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Let everybody be happy. Let everyone be healthy. Let nobody be sick. But today we have a healthcare industry which is actually preying upon the sickness of people. When you say cancer, I have attended conferences and meetings of pharma establishments where they talk about cancer as the cutting edge opportunity, for medical business. So the whole concept has changed. And Ayurveda is very much focused on lifestyle, diet, and medicine. And I want to highlight some of the new researches that are emerged today. I don't know how many of you are aware, that, some of our major killers like cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, hypertension, for which we are taking medicines, they are now, modern research is telling us that the best way to treat them and cure them is through diet and lifestyle. There is a trial in the Europe, which is called as direct trial, diabetes remission trial, clinical trial for remission of diabetes. And their finding is that if you get, hyperglycemia, and if you start medications immediately, then you're going to be a diabetic for life. On the other hand, if you participate in a weight management program and make some changes in your lifestyle, within 1 year, you can reverse diabetes and you can be on remission. You will not need any medications. This is one of the latest findings. It was published in the Lancet journal. So if you look for direct trial, Google direct trial, and you can get all this information. And I don't know how many of you have, because there is no cure for diabetes. Once you get the disease, you are only trying to manage it. And blood sugar, controlling blood sugar alone is not enough. Diabetes progresses. It causes microvascular complications. It damages your eyes. It damages your kidneys. It damages your heart. It damages your nerves. You get diabetic nephropathy. You get diabetic foot ulcer. You get carbuncles. So it is a disease that greatly compromises the quality of your life. And in the early stages, if you are able to bring about a change in your diet and lifestyle, and this is such a sad thing that a country like India is now labeled as the diabetes capital of the world. And this is because, in ancient times, our diet was more suitable for our lifestyle. But today we have given up our traditional lifestyle and started using Western foods, which are not wrong in itself, but not suited for our climate and our place. In the West, it's a very cold country. And so they need to eat more fat, and then they have, they to stimulate their metabolism. And so even alcohol is needed to survive in some cold weathers. But in India, especially if you look at the South, this is absolutely unnecessary. Ayurveda says that not to drink alcohol in such weather, it is harmful. And also eating very high, heavy fried, fats and foods. This is what is causing the rise in incidence of cardiovascular disease as well as diabetes. Now, when it comes to hypertension, how many of us are aware that the best treatment of hypertension is diet and exercise? In fact, the best medicine recommended by American Heart Association for high blood pressure is called as DASH. Dietary approaches to stop hypertension. It's called as DASH. There was a cardiologist in the US. His name is Dean Ornish. He was the first person to show that it is only through diet and lifestyle that you can reverse the blockages in the coronary disease coronary artery. The only problem is that you will have to bring about these changes in your diet and lifestyle. Otherwise, you take medicine. And even with medicine, there is a recurrence of heart disease. Even with bypass surgery, people are still dying because that is not a solution for this problem. So many such diseases, and Ayurveda clearly tells that, when you are in the pre-hypertension or early hypertension, in as quickly as 3 days to 3 weeks, you can bring about drastic changes in your blood pressure without having to take any medicines. And if you can sustain it, then you will not need any antihypertensive medicines. So diet, lifestyle, and medicine, how this becomes a medical intervention is a very important aspect of Ayurveda. And then we have mind-body medicine. This is also very interesting. I don't know how many of us are aware that, there is a deep link between our body and mind. And Ayurveda is all about exploring and taking this to full advantage. There is a crosstalk between our mind and body. And Ayurveda tells this is like the ghee and the iron pot. If you pour hot ghee into the iron pot gets heated. If you heat an iron pot which contains ghee, the ghee will also get heated. This is how the body and the mind is. If one gets heated, the other is affected. And today in modern science, we are talking about this crosstalk, this axis of the body and mind as a PNEI axis, psycho, neuro, endocrino, immunology. And it's quite interesting to see that this is a molecular understanding of the old Ayurvedic model of the human body, manas, vata, pitta, and kapha. That is how we looked at the body and the mind. The mind is the manas, vata is the neurological regulation, pitta is endocrinological regulation, and kapha is the immune regulation. These are the three regulatory systems of the body. And there is a continuous crosstalk. So if you have a stress in the mind, your neurological regulation is affected. Your hormonal regulation is affected. It can affect your immune system. Similarly, if something happens in the body, this is called as the neurochemicals of happiness. There is a neurochemical called Anandamide. This is an endocannabinoid. Means, our body itself is a drugstore. You can get a high. You don't need to take any cannabis from outside. If you can know your body itself is a pharmacy, can produce all these chemicals that can keep you in a high without creating any harm. This Anandamide, it's a very interesting name. Ananda is one of the few chemicals in the world, biochemicals which we see in the body, which is given a Sanskrit name and is very apt. Ananda means bliss. So when your body produces more of Anandamide, you feel very blissful. So it's called as a bliss molecule. So many years ago, scientists found that the body has receptors for endocannabinoids, for cannabinoid. So they were wondering why the body has a receptor. So there has to be some chemical which will fit into that receptor. And nobody was able to find it. And one Israeli scientist, amongst many others, was searching for this. And he happened to come to India, to Aurobindo Ashram. And while he was at the Aurobindo Ashram, he had a vision that he would be the one who will discover this molecule that fits into this receptor. And in that moment of inspiration at the Aurobindo Ashram, he already gave a name. He had a feeling that what he is going to discover will be an amide chemically, and that he should call it as Anandamide. 4 years later, it so happened that he became the first scientist to discover this molecule. And he kept his resolve. He called this as Anandamide. And do you know how you can produce more Anandamide in our body? Just run. If you can really run very hard every day, then you will have adequate supply of Anandamide to keep you blissful throughout the day. You don't need to do any meditation. So our body has all the ingredients that is necessary to keep us blissful and stress-free. One is the Anandamide endocannabinoid. Another one is endorphin, which makes us, so if you are engaging in active sports or martial arts, which is why in our tradition, people were trained in martial arts in the young age. So that, it's a mood elevator. Endorphin elevates your mood. It enables you to, so living a particular lifestyle and understanding body-mind complexity, this is all about the Ayurvedic way of living, empowering yourself. Then you have, if you practice yoga, what happens? Your body produces a chemical called GABA. GABA is an anti-anxiety molecule. And the more and more you produce, the less you will be affected by anxiety. There is another molecule called serotonin, which is called as the happiness molecule, which is produced a lot from your stomach. And if you maintain certain food habits, and also if you can keep some structure in your life, work according to a timetable. This is why some disciplining in lifestyle is very important. These chemicals are stimulated and you feel, happy. And then there is another molecule called oxytocin, which is called the bonding molecule, which is supposed to be, influenced by the heart. And this is the reason why the love symbol is always associated with the heart. Because if you hug another person, you get a lot of oxytocin is produced, especially mother-child cuddling produces a lot of oxytocin. And oxytocin makes you feel more bonded. And this is why socializing, interacting with people, touching each other, in an affectionate way. All this is very important for this chemical to be released. And then we have also dopamine, which is called the reward molecule. So it is very important that when you achieve something, you self-congratulate yourself. And this is why sometimes we have to recognize and give awards, and we shouldn't overdo it, but to a certain extent, it's good to give a word of appreciation to somebody around you. I mean, you might be stimulating their dopamine, making them feel better, and this will also improve our interactions with them. So if we know how to activate these biochemicals in our own body, which is what, when you compare Ayurveda with modern knowledge, this is what the whole Ayurvedic way of good living is all about. Completely changing your chemistry. And in fact, that is why in Ayurveda, the essence of your digested food is called rasa. Rasa means actually enjoyment. Rasa means the fluid of joy. So if you correctly digest and absorb the food that you eat, then you have all the ingredients to bring out the delight of life. And Ayurveda says, what is health? Health is to be happy without any reason. Being happy for no reason. When you are like that, then you can say you are healthy. Nothing less, nothing more. It doesn't matter whether your blood test results are okay. It doesn't matter whether your scans have come out well. If you are not happy just for no reason, because we all need a reason to be happy. In fact, if somebody is happy, we always ask, what is the reason? Why are you happy? But we must reach a stage where we are happy because we exist. When we take delight in that very existence, that we are here, and that is what Ayurveda calls as health, sukha samnikam arogya. So this is how Ayurveda leads us to that higher state of health and wellness, which also brings a lot of changes in the way we interact with our environment, the way we interact with nature. And it is wrong to say that Ayurveda, many people think, is vegetarianism. It is not. And Ayurveda means tough diet. No, Ayurveda tells that you can use anything under the sun, herbal, animal, chemical, anything can be used, but they should be used in a balanced way. So even non-vegetarian diet is accepted, but Ayurveda tells, don't eat for your tongue, don't eat for pleasure. Eat, if it is nutritionally necessary, you can take that nature, because it's a food chain, food web. But humans are the only people who eat meat just for the pleasure of it. No animal eats unless it really requires it. I'm always, intrigued by the fact that for animal studies in science, we have so many restrictions. And if you look at the total number of animals that are killed, for scientific research, comes in thousands, maybe a few lakhs, fine. But if you look at the animals that are slaughtered for food, it is in billions every day. And there is no ethics there. And many of these animals are actually sacrificed in such cruel way. So Ayurveda also talks here about some balance, how your nutrition can be balanced. When there is a medical need, when there is a nutritional need, and at a certain age, when your protein requirement is high, Ayurveda recommends, meat. And the old concept was that you should only eat meat that you have hunted, but that's not practical today. According to Ayurveda, killing an animal that you're domesticating, you are, taking care of it and then killing it. This is considered to be cheating. So what Ayurveda says is, go to the forest, be hunted and hunt. That is the fair way of getting your meat. And that was the way hunting was done in ancient times. I'm just talking about some ethical issues, because Ayurveda is also about ethical medicine. Because ethical medicine is that which gives you a deeper sense of calm and centeredness, which is very necessary for realizing higher states of mental well-being. So, and then Ayurveda is talking about preventive and predictive medicine. And this is extremely important. As we know, in the Yoga Sutras, it is mentioned, Heyam Dukkham Anagadam. We have to remove the sorrow that has not yet come. So Ayurveda talks about how we can identify our physical and mental constitution and understand our susceptibilities and our strengths, and then choose a way of living that will, prevent so many illnesses even before they can manifest. And finally, Ayurveda is about healthy aging. So I hope this overview gives an idea about what Ayurveda is in a nutshell, what Ayurveda is dealing with in a nutshell. All these elements make up Ayurveda. Healthy aging is extremely important because we are all destined for that ultimate fate in our lives. I mean, we just pass away, and of course we think we are immortal. That is the whole paradox of life. And Ayurveda tells that we must plan for an old age. And this is very, very important because Ayurveda tells it's possible to age successfully. Today, people are frightened of aging because we think that aging means crippled, dependent. But in Ayurveda and in our tradition, the old age was the time for Vanaprastha and Sannyasa, where people were contemplative. They were self-dependent. Today, we have created a situation where old people need to be put into old age shelter homes. Whereas in our tradition, old people were the shelter for the world. They were considered as big trees that gave shade because they were more mature. When we are born, we have tamas. I hope you are aware of rajas, tamas, and sattva, the three gunas of the mind, because you have into this course for some days now. I'm sure you're aware of that, because I don't want to spend time looking into these basic concepts. So we all know when we are born, we cry and we sleep, which means we are tamasic. And as we reach our adolescence, we become rebels. So the rajas comes. This is natural. The third stage, we are supposed to become mature, but we carry with our tamas and rajas. That is what distinguishes human life from other animals. A full-grown cow is full-grown. Physically grown is mentally also grown. But humans, physical growth does not always correspond to mental evolution. So our Shastras tell us that the movement from tamas to rajas happens automatically. When you reach adolescence, you have that rush of blood and the rajasic expressions. But after that, whether you evolve into a sattvic state, it depends on us. We can still remain a child our whole life under the grip of our tamas and rajas, or we can evolve into a sattvic state. And if you develop your sattvic state before you reach old age, then your body will not trouble you. So in old age, we must get a sattvic stage. Ayurveda clearly tells it is not necessary that you should have cognitive decline, except in the moments before your death. You can be, this is called as successful aging. Today, modern gerontologists are also talking about successful aging. It is possible at the age of 75 not to have any major physical illnesses, no cardiovascular problems, no diabetes. You can still have fairly good eyesight. It's all possible. According to Ayurveda, eyesight declines by 60. But you can still keep it under check. You may need some assistance, but it doesn't have to be really very bad. Cognitive decline can be prevented. Today, we are in a very big dilemma. To save your heart, we are killing our brain. Or when we try to save our brain, we kill our heart, because this cholesterol business. Now they have come with the concept that dietary cholesterol is not harmful. It's only certain types of fats, especially, deep fried, repeatedly fried fats. Certain types of fats are only harmful. Otherwise, fat is so essential for our system. And brain, is just 2% of the body is weight, but 25% of our brain is cholesterol. And most of the problems that we are facing in old age today is because we are not taking care of our brain. The fat is damaged, demyelinating diseases, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, Parkinson's. These are all diseases affecting people in the old age. And FDA gives a warning that if you take statins which reduce cholesterol, you may have brain problems. So in order to save the heart, we kill our brain. Or without knowing, eating too much of heart, we damage our heart. And Ayurveda tells us there is a way to preserve both your brain and heart, and that is by proper use. When we are using milk, there are good milk and bad milk. Today, the commercial milk that we are taking is very harmful. The cow, how we graze the cow. There are certain specific types of cow in our tradition called the gir cow, which feeds on the grass and which is exposed to sunlight. These cows produce more rich nutrients. I don't know how many of you have heard of vitamin K2. I call this as vitamin Krishna because Krishna was the first person in our tradition to show the importance of not only grazing the cows, exposing them to sunlight, making them eat grass, and then stealing the butter and ghee and milk and, nourishing oneself, taking care of that whole process. Now, what is vitamin? Vitamin K, we all know, is important in blood clotting, but there's another vitamin called vitamin K2. This vitamin is essential. Vitamin D helps the body to absorb calcium. But that calcium, if it gets deposited in wrong places, it can cause cardiovascular disease, so many problems. So the calcium that is absorbed need to be deposited in the right locations, like in the bones. For that, we need K2, vitamin K2. And only grass-fed cows, which are exposed to enough sunlight, produces vitamin K2. There are compounds, in ghee, for example, traditionally made ghee is very different from commercial ghee. This ghee has medium chain fatty acids. They don't increase weight. Medium chain fatty acids are used for burning and releasing energy, so they don't get stored. But if it is long chain fatty acids, they will get stored. So many such interesting concepts about nutrition also Ayurveda provides. And Ayurveda tells us how you can reach old age, preserving your mental health, being sattvic, and becoming a shelter to the world. Death, according to Ayurveda, is like, if birth is like sunrise, death is like sunset. So when you have a timely death, it is as meditative. It's only in our tradition that we celebrated death, but today it is wrong we are doing. A person who dies of accident, we shouldn't be celebrating that person's death. It is a tragedy. A person who lives a complete life and passes away, it's like the sunset. So we celebrate such a passing away. In Tamil Nadu, we have seen people dancing when the corpse is taken to the funeral. This is the concept that even death needs to be celebrated because it is a completion. And it's as beautiful and contemplative as birth. So Ayurveda is all about preventing untimely death and accepting timely death. And what I remember when I was very young, some of our elders in the family, they used to tell when we used to go home for vacations, they used to call and tell, next time you come, I will not be here. It's as if they knew that they are going to pass away. And, they would come and, they would feel happy that they have talked to us and given us some small gifts. And next time when you go, they are not there. It happened. I have seen this happening to many people. Not nowadays. Nowadays, you are shocked by some untimely death. I remember a poet once said, "Oh, death, where are thy stings that the seers have seen in thee?" Because death for us is a frightening experience. So this poet is talking about death as a gentle mother, as a mother who comes and puts a child to sleep. And the poet is asking, "Oh, death, where are thy stings that the seers have seen in thee?" Here I see death coming like a mother, gently coming and caressing a child and putting him to sleep like a lullaby. So death becomes, like falling asleep naturally and gently. That is not something that we need to be afraid of, which we have to embrace with understanding. Dealing with death is a very, very important aspect of the Ayurvedic view of life. And what Ayurveda also tells us is that it is not death. We have to discard our body consciously. Yogenande tanutyajam. The Kalidasa is talking about the Raghuvamsha kings who never died, but they discarded their body when the time came. They would sit in a yoga mudra and then discard their bodies when the time comes. So death will wait. And this is a very, very important aspect of dealing with old age. Today we know, because modern medical technology has prolonged life, but not quality of health. So prolonging lifespan is one thing, prolonging health span is another thing. What we need is prolongation of health span, not just lifespan. So today people are worried about the burden of old people who are crippled, mentally crippled, because they have dementia, they have Alzheimer's. How do we take care of such a society? The best care that we can give them is the ability for self-care. And that is what Ayurveda talks about as healthy aging. So these are very quickly, this is the nutshell of what I wanted to discuss today. I thought that the last 20 minutes we will keep for some discussion. So another 8 minutes I will take to, sum up some of these concepts and a few more. There are much more material in the slides, which I would, encourage you to read and develop further understanding. Now, nature-centered medicine in Ayurveda, we say that for a particular people, what is growing there in that region is most suited. This kind of seasonality and regionality is something we are completely lost today because of globalization. This was so protective that people eating fruits and vegetables that grow in particular regions. In Ladakh, for example, Ladakh is a very high altitude region. There, people use the milk of yak, and that is very high in cholesterol, but they also use soya, which is growing there naturally, which has a compound called lecithin, which can thin the cholesterol. There, the water is hard, so people can easily develop kidney stones. But they have in that region a lot of amaranthus which grows, which breaks these stones. So just see how nature provides. That in that region, because of high altitude, they have oxygen problem, shortage. So the plant ephedra grows there, and these people make tea out of ephedra and not our tea leaves. And this ephedra is a bronchodilator. So when you go to those high altitude regions, drinking that tea is the best to survive there. In South India, especially in places like Andhra, I've always wondered why people eat so much of chilies. It's such a hot place. It is not, counter logic. But the reason is wherever there is too much of heat, especially dry heat where humidity is less, people tend to use these kind of pungent substances because they promote sweating. If you don't promote sweating, the heat trapped inside can cause a heat wave and can cause severe health problems. But when you take those strong Andhra pickles in the summer, your body begins to sweat, you lose the heat, and this helps in balancing. I don't know how many of you are aware that sambar, the study recently done on the sambar, the South Indian dish, revealed that it offers protection against colon cancer. In the Europe, colon cancer incidence is very high. In India, if you look at South India and North India colon cancer is having a higher incidence. Probably the use of, these kind of regional dishes are very, very important. Similarly, turmeric, is a very good anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer medicine. But if you don't add pepper, the curcumin will not get absorbed. So that is why in olden times whenever we used turmeric, we also used pepper. But today we have replaced it with chilies. So now the turmeric only colors your intestine. It goes in and goes out without giving that benefit. So whenever you use turmeric, we must use. So this kind of regional, understanding and knowledge is completely lost. Similarly, in summer, we always drink very diluted buttermilk with little salt. So it was because we knew that just plain water is not enough, because salt is lost by sweating. And that is why salted buttermilk, and digestion is weak. So if you drink a lot of water, your digestion will get affected. So thin buttermilk with little spices to stimulate the digestion, replace the lost salt and cool your digestive system. This was a perfect summer drink. So these kind of nature-centered approaches which look at the local climate, I think it's very important that we revive this. In Ayurveda, we say that food should be nutritious, food should be assimilable, and it should also be tasty. Now, this is an impossible equation to fulfill, because we can find when we make food nutritious, it loses its taste. And if we, sometimes nutritious food cannot be assimilated or digested. So this is where Ayurvedic art of cooking, I think it is one of the most scientific approaches to cooking, because Ayurveda says food should be tasty. So you need a recipe, a very beautiful way of making food. And in India, this was an art. Even kings were considered qualified only if they knew how to cook. I don't know how many of us are aware that one of the most authentic textbooks on cookery was by King Nala, Pakadarpana of King Nala. And when he was moving incognito, it was his cookery skills that enabled him to find refuge in another king's court. So cooking was taken very seriously, and food was considered to be the biggest gift. So we have this tradition of Anandamide. And food should not be sold. Food should be given out of love, because food has that ability to carry that emotional vibrations of the person who is serving it. And Ayurveda says never buy food. Today, our toilets are in our bedrooms and our dining is outside. In olden days, it was the opposite. We used to eat inside and excrete outside. Now, this is the modern way of life. The whole thing has reversed. So food is something which should, it was like Annapurneshwari. The most sacred part of our house was the kitchen and where food was cooked. And why the woman was made, the males can be cooks, but the woman has to serve, because food should be served with motherly love, because in food makes us reborn. So these are very interesting philosophical and conceptual perspectives that Ayurveda offers. And also this whole art and science of cooking, of making food tasty, delicious, nutritious, and assimilable. This is the principle of. Now here is the study of the human body. As I was telling, in Ayurveda, we start from creation, the macrocosm, the microcosm, and then the physiology, understanding until we go to death. So that whole evolution of the human life, understanding its purpose, this is how Ayurveda studies. Now, another point I want to talk about here is, with this, I think I will conclude. When we were all students at that time, the WHO slogan was health for all by 2000 AD. When I was studying Ayurveda, this is what we all heard. So we were wondering how it is going to happen. 2000 AD, everybody is going to get health. Now WHO is planning to package health into a capsule or bottle and distribute. Is it so simple? I mean, that slogan itself sounded so simplistic. And around 2000, what we saw was AIDS, the great pandemic of AIDS. And the whole world was in shock. There was no health for all. Then the WHO slogan has now changed to universal health coverage. WHO now realizes that we cannot give health, cannot be distributed to everybody, but let us give health care for all. And now what happened? The COVID pandemic. The countries with access to the best health care, they have been, struggling and suffering even more than people who did not have that much access to healthcare, like the United States, Italy, during the first wave. And even now, you can see Europe is facing a big surge in COVID-19 in spite of access. So this is where, if Ayurveda were to give a slogan for the future, it would be health intelligence for all. We cannot give health. We cannot package and give health. It is not enough even if we give health care to everybody. More and more hospitals coming is not really a sign of progress. More and more transplants being needed is not really a sign of progress. What is needed is health intelligence, food intelligence, life intelligence. And this is what Ayurveda is all about. Ayurveda, Ayushoveda, making life aware of itself. So health intelligence for all, this is the slogan, I think, through which Ayurveda will make a resurgence in this world. And Ayurvedic texts say that wherever there is life and wherever there is the intelligence in that life, there Ayurveda will be there. Wherever there is biodiversity and there is life, Ayurveda will be born there. When you look at the word Sanskrit, it's different from other names of other languages because they are all having a regional connotation. English, for England, German for Germany, French for France, Hindi for Hindustani, Sanskrit for whom? It's just a refined speech. It's universal. Similarly, traditional Chinese medicine for China, traditional African medicine for Africa. But Ayurveda is knowledge of life. Wherever there is life, there is Ayurveda. So one beautiful thing is that I believe that we did not change Ayurveda to TIM, traditional Indian medicine, because that would be philosophically wrong. Ayurveda has always had a global outlook. Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu. And the way Ayurveda has to spread globally is also what I would call as global localization. This is a philosophy of Ayurveda. Think globally, but act locally. So if you are in America, then you need to live according to the nature around you there. If you are in India, we know that Kerala is different, Tamil Nadu is different, every state, every region is different. And Ayurveda tells that every 12 yojanas, everything changes. We have to customize. And that is the idea, this grand vision of a global outlook and local action. That is the philosophy of Ayurveda. That is the knowledge of life. And I think that this is one of the greatest contributions that the Indian civilization has made. And it is one of the few living aspects of our tradition. And that's every Indian, it's our birthright to know and benefit from this knowledge. So I think with this, I will conclude. Yeah, there are just maybe one or two more points. One point is also just wanting to show you that sometimes the knowledge in our tradition is, you can read it. There are many, many such additional points that I put in the slides. One is about genetic information. You know, Ayurveda was one of the earliest medical systems to think about medical genetics. Ayurveda says that there are 3 levels of genetic coding. Everything that we are in our body is coded in our bija, or, you know, today this would correspond to the genome. So you can see the idea of a genome is proposed in Ayurvedic texts so many thousands of years through the concept of bija, which is the blueprint for the whole body. And that bija has many parts, bija bhagas, each coding for different regions of the body. And that bija bhaga can be further subdivided into bija bhaga avayava, which codes for specific organs. And Ayurveda is telling so many thousands of years ago that if any bija bhaga avayava is damaged, then that particular organ will be damaged when that child is born. So this is one of the earliest ideas about genetic diseases. Ayurveda also talks about microorganisms which you cannot see with the eye, and talks about how they can cause pathological conditions. And they are classified into different types. So even if you look at the history of medicine and science, Ayurveda has very interesting things to offer. Ayurveda was one of the earliest medical systems to talk about surgery, to talk about anatomical dissection. Sushruta describes how the dead body should be dissected, and you should learn anatomy directly by observation. So I think I will stop here, and we can take a few questions. There are many more slides I've included. That's because I was also requested that there should be reading material. So reading material is provided in 2 forms. One is the extended slides, more than what I have discussed. And the second is a list or a link where you can identify some books. And I would also like to suggest that you read. This is easy to procure. The books on Ayurveda by Professor M.S. Valiyathan. He was a cardiovascular surgeon, and he developed a lot of valves, and he had a very illustrious career as a cardiovascular surgeon. And later he has spent his remaining life, and he's still doing it in the study of Ayurveda. So he has written a modern rendering of the classical Ayurvedic books, which would be very interesting reading material. I thought I will discuss this, so I did not include it in that list so that I can introduce. So his books are called The Legacy of Charaka, The Legacy of Sushruta, and The Legacy of Vakbhada. So these are books worth reading, and they're all available, for purchase. They can be purchased online or from bookshops. They are quite widely circulating. So this is a modern clinician, surgeon's rediscovery of Ayurveda. And Professor M.S. Valiathan was always telling why he came to Ayurveda, because when he was reaching the pinnacle of his career as a cardiovascular surgeon, he suddenly realized that everything in medicine we are borrowing and importing from outside. What is it that India is still not able to make an impact in the world of science or medicine? Why is that so? And that is how he was led to study our own traditions. And he believed that unless as Indians we go to our roots, we start exploring Ayurveda, we cannot make original contributions to the world of medicine. And that is why he has actually, taken up this task of introducing Ayurveda to Indians itself, to show us what medical legacy we have. And not only we have a great history of Ayurveda, but we can also make further history. Once, when I was first invited to the UK at the Wellcome Institute for the History of Medicine, there was a Westerner who jokingly, he was just taunting me, pulling my leg, saying that, this is the best place to come for Ayurveda because this is a history of medicine institute and Ayurveda is history. I was very young at that time, a little rush of blood in my veins. So I immediately said, no, Ayurveda has created history, continuing to create history, and will continue to create history. So your job is not done. But today, I can tell with great confidence that this is very much a possibility. That with people like Professor M.S. Valiathan and many institutions working on Ayurveda research, the time may come where we can bring Ayurveda and modern science together and continue to contribute in original ways for the further development of medicine. And M.S. Valiathan calls his whole concept as Ayurveda biology. How Ayurveda can enrich biology and how biology can enrich Ayurveda. So with that, let me conclude. And the remaining time we can use for some discussion.
Thank you so much, Ram Manohar ji. It was a really beautiful session. I think all of us, not just with the concept of Ayurveda, but I think with the very concept of life itself, it brings so much delight through, the study and practice of Ayurveda. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of questions and Dr. Mansi ji, would you like to unmute yourself? Mansi ji, we are not able to hear you, though you are unmuted. Would you like to type in your question in the chat box? Okay, maybe we can go ahead. Dr. Kayalviri ji, please go ahead.
So it was a very wonderful session, sir. And I am a biomedical engineer, sir. And in our course, we first start with anatomy and physiology. We refer to books like Guyton Hall. Is it necessary for us to revamp the whole anatomy and physiology with aspects of Ayurveda? Don't you think it should be the main book? Because even in MBBS or biomedical engineering, Guyton and Hall, those books are used as a reference or the study material. What do you think about it?
Yeah, because Ayurveda anatomy also has its limitations. What we have is the synthetic view. Details are sometimes missing. So I personally feel that Ayurveda provides a good framework, to reorganize the anatomical and physiological knowledge into a more comprehensive framework. We could use the details from modern anatomy, but put it within this, Srishti Sharira, Garbha Sharira framework, and then we would have these are the kind of activities that as Indians we could do, because by bringing our tradition, because Ayurveda needs to be modernized, it needs to be made contemporary. And if this is what I was telling about also as MS Valiathan saying that Greek medicine, when it got modernized, it became modern medicine. Every system, their own roots, they modernize. And modernization is very much part of our idea of progress. Even in our religious traditions, we always used to bhakti. Everywhere we had new acharyas coming and new avishkaranas of the old traditions. And that is very much called for in Ayurveda. I think it will be mutually beneficial. And from India, we can make this contribution. That's what I feel. But for this, we need collaboration between Ayurveda experts and modern, scientists and medical doctors.
Yes. So then one more question. The predictive medicine, which books do we refer to? You were telling about the predictive nature.
Yeah, unfortunately, the knowledge in Ayurveda is still in the classical text codified. This is a task that we have to do to bring it into a form that can be presented as predictive medicine. Now you may need to consult an Ayurveda physician personally, and depending on his skill, he may be able to give you some advice. But today, because the 3 PPP, as they call it, predictive, preventive, and promotive medicine, that is emerging as a new branch. And so a lot of this Ayurvedic knowledge needs to be reinterpreted. The problem in India is, we have a system which is pluralistic, where we allow different medical systems to exist, but we don't allow their cooperation. There is no cooperation. There is actually conflict. And this is the sad part of, India in modern times. India is the only country where Ayurveda has a legal status, but we are in a conflict with the modern medical system. So if we can bring these two things together, then I think we will be able to make a lot of new innovations in medicine and new developments that can make us even leaders in many areas of medical development.
Thanks a lot, sir. And I would like to take the steps in this, sir. Thanks for this insight.
Thank you.
Professor Pankaj ji, if you would like to go ahead.
Ji, Namrata ji, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Namaskar. Sir, namaskar, Ram Manohar sir. It was really a wonderful session. I have learned so many things. Actually, I've been president of a health university, that is IHMR University in Jaipur. And we were working very closely with the WHO also. And WHO has added, as you know, not only the mental, emotional, and physical aspect, but also the spiritual health. So, and we happened to meet one person, and he gave a very good definition of swast is, swa mein sthit. But, and also you've rightly said, not only going for a treatment of it, but how we can go for the prevention of the whole thing. So, sir, isme kya hai ki jo swa mein sthit wala hai, like, when people are going into abhav, prabhav, but not living in swabhav and swadharma. And as you mentioned that, ki jaise high blood pressure ka bhi hai, that how you can change by that ahar, vihar, vichar, vishwas. To in cheezon ko kaise hum aur popular karen, sir? Kyunki even in the name of Ayurveda also, there are so many YouTube university ka gyan chal raha hai, kahin kuch chal raha hai. So agar kuch authentic way mein, and also the dissemination in the right way, which the people will be able to understand, it can be a great service. और हम लोगों ने सर एक प्रोग्राम किया था in the palace of Mount Abu, उनके राजा ने हम लोग को होस्ट किया था. यहाँ पे स्वामी अग्निवेश जी और बहुत सारे वैद्य लोग आए थे. उसमें भी पता लगता है कि 4-5 वैद्य लोग बेचारे मर भी गए. तो lot of big knowledge is getting destroyed, sir. So my suggestion is how to make it very contemporary, the authentic source. और जो हमारे वैद्य लोग जो धीमे-धीमे खत्म से हो रहे हैं, उनकी knowledge को कैसे किया जाए, sir? That is my humble request. Thank you.
Yes, I know it is a challenging task, and it can only unfold through a process. It will not happen overnight. The problem why it is getting delayed is, right from the colonial period, even before that, there has been a lot of challenges for the Ayurvedic community. Unfavorable policies. Ayurveda, even today, people are coming to study Ayurveda because they don't get other options. If you don't, first of all, invest intellectually into the system, it will not grow. This is a very big challenge. The people who come are, the least motivated. Now things are changing. But when we were students, I was part of an educational experiment where after SSLC, we were taken to study Ayurveda, because after 12th, everybody will try for modern medicine, and only if they fail, they will come to Ayurveda. And by the time you study Ayurveda, people are trying to still get admission for modern medicine. So the problem is basically at the education level. And in North India, you can see many of the Ayurveda physicians are practicing Western medicine, even today. Especially in many village areas, rural areas, they are practicing Western medicine. So unless the Ayurvedic system is empowered right at the level of education, you will not be able to create. Now, one of the challenges for the common man is they tell Ayurveda is fine, but how to find a good Ayurveda physician? Because many people are engaged in commercial activities. It is less regulated in Ayurveda than in modern medicine. In India, the system of implementation is very, very poor. So at multiple levels, the change has to happen. But if we want to facilitate this, to make this go faster, I think what we need is a multidisciplinary effort. That the developing Ayurveda should not be the responsibility of only the Ayurvedic community. We have to own this as our heritage. And we must have people from all walks of life involved in the development of Ayurveda, especially collaboration between modern scientists and traditional systems of medicine. Unless this collective approach comes. Today now, we have a very impoverished community which is struggling for its own survival. When you study a BMS course or come out, Ayurveda physician is only focused on how he can survive. He has no, background or the opportunity to think about developing the system. The opportunities are less, funding is less. So unless we make it as a national, goal or agenda, and unless everybody says this is for our, growth, and what is good in Ayurveda should be accepted. Many things are outdated. They should be eliminated. That kind of a discrimination is also necessary. That kind of an updation and making it contemporary. I think that is the way to move forward. And perhaps these kind of events will spread more awareness, more people will get involved, and then we can facilitate this whole process of transformation. These are the thoughts that come to my mind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Namaste, Dr. Ram. Richa this side. Pranam.
Namaste, Pranam.
How are you?
Oh, fine. Nice to see you again.
Yes. Well, good. We will conclude the session, Dr. Ram. It's almost 12:30. Yeah. And today, all our faculty members have a midterm presentation also in this break time of 12:30 to 2 as part of the UGC HRDC guidelines. So we will just begin this after the conclusion of your session, sir, if that is okay. Yes, sir. I'll connect with you, my Dr. Ram. Separately, I'll connect with you. Thank you so much, and Pranam. May I invite Namrata or Srihari to conclude with a prayer? Or we can just close our eyes and just observe a minute of silence and feeling grateful for what is and what is not. Let's take a deep breath in and exhale out. With a smile, let's take another deep breath in and exhale out. Slowly, we may open our eyes. Pranams and good afternoon to everyone. And we will now start with our midterm presentation. A lot of presentations have come. We could stop the live stream also